So there I was on a random, I don't know, Wednesday or Thursday morning, 3 a.m., slurping some spaghetti noodles down. And I always have my phone off to the side when I eat because I need it actively cooking my attention span. Seemingly out of nowhere, I just start seeing all this hype around this game called Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I'm a very avid gamer. I have been since I was little. I always keep up with gaming news, pretty much always playing something. But this game, I just kind of flew under the radar for me. It's almost like it shadow dropped from my point of view. Critics and gamers alike were raving about it, which is pretty rare to see. I mean, at least one of those two sides is always hating on something. So this was a rare case, and especially for a turn-based game in the big 2025, that's unheard of. I looked into it a little bit. It looked pretty unique and original. So I just decided to give it a shot. I'm glad to say that I have absolutely no regrets. You can call this video the Donut Factory because I'm about to spend way too damn long glazing this game. And as a hairy American man myself, I can already confidently tell you that this is a much better gift from the French than this hag. I'm going to be doing this video in more of a review format. I want to talk about what I think of the gameplay and the story, the music, etc. But I'm also going to have a dedicated section to talking about the lore and interpreting some of the art that this game provides. So there are timestamps below if you want to pick and choose. I realize not every aspect of this game is going to be for everyone, so just go nuts with that. I didn't do a ton of research for this video, just kind of a lot of the lore bits that I gathered myself playing the game several times. There is a little light research here and there, so just take everything I say with a grain of salt because I may have interpreted things wrong. Please let me know if you have a different perspective on something. I do want to apologize for some of the lore bits I get wrong, but I especially want to apologize for how badly I'm going to butcher these French names. I'm an American guy. Yeah, it's going to be bad. There will be some minor spoilers, such as character or enemy names, but partway through the video we are going to get into heavy spoilers. Please, this game's incredible. Just play the game first. I did play this game on PS5, so please consider that if you played it on PC and you might have a different take on something. I recorded this before any kind of photo mode was added, so I tried to get the best clips with the best visuals that I could to get my point across. I just want to explain why this game is going to win Game of the Year 2025, because it is going to win Game of the Year in 2025. So let's just get into it. Wait, hold on. We need to add to the set piece. You're going to do this with me, all right? Let's go on this adventure together. This game was developed by Sandfall Interactive. You may have heard of them before from absolutely nothing, because this is their first game. This company formed because a lot of them broke off from Ubisoft. You might recognize video game giant Ubisoft from creating such games like Assassin's Creed and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Smash Up. The team has 33 people, which is hilarious considering not only the title of this game, but if you look all throughout this game, there are a ton of references to the number 33. The head of Sandfall is Guillaume Broche, who is a huge fan of the Souls games such as Sekiro, as well as the Final Fantasy franchise, and that will be very apparent when we're talking about the gameplay of this game. This really is a ragtag group. I mean, they even found one man on a random forum on the internet to create the entire soundtrack. But let's hold our horses. We'll talk about this absolute king a little later. The game takes place on what's known as the continent, and you start in the city of Lumiere. The city of Lumiere is highly inspired by the real city of France in the early 1800s, known as the Belle Epoque era. This era is known for its beauty and its art, and it's even where the City of Love term comes from when describing Paris. We open with a shot of a warped, broken Eiffel Tower. It's clear that this city went through some catastrophic events in the past. The city is also cursed, with one of the most original and unique concepts I've seen in a long time. When you look out into the distance across the sea, you will see the Paintress. It is unknown if she's a human or a monster. This daunting figure wakes up once a year for an annual event where she stands up and ticks the number above her head down by 1. As soon as the number on her monolith ticks down by 1, every single person of that age or older just Thanos snaps. At this point, the number's 34. She wakes and puts it down to 33, and all 33-year-olds or older, they fade into nothingness. Every single year after this, the city of Lumiere sends out an expedition of people who go out across the sea into the unknown to try and end the curse and kill the Paintress. The expedition is now, of course, Expedition 33. You play as a man named Gustav, who is a member of this expedition, but you'll eventually get more party members later. And that's all I want to say for now. That is just the mere concept. This is like the first 20 minutes of the game, and I do not want to ruin the story for anyone. It's a very, very heavy spoiler game, so Like I said, please just play the game. But I do want to emphasize that this just small concept, this first 20 minutes or so, just absolutely hooked me. Hooked me. I was completely locked in. I was ready to go on this adventure. And what reeled me in even more was the gameplay. Expedition 33 is a turn-based game, but it doesn't have that slow feel that other turn-based games have. That's because of the dodge and parry system. It takes inspiration from Mario RPGs, of all things. But instead of having to jump over a little Goomba, you have to avoid weapons the size of an automobile from ripping you in half. There's a lot of variety here, from attacks that have super tight dodge windows to attacks where the enemy winds up just a hair too long, trying to fake you out, maybe with a fake punch. There's even a variety of different ways to dodge. There are standard attacks in which you must dodge and parry. There are sweeping attacks where you have to jump, and the gradient attacks that enemies try to hit you with must be countered with a gradient parry. You can't mix and match here, you have to respond in the appropriate way. There is a lot of variety here that keeps it from getting stale, and a lot of these different counters are introduced slowly over the game. It definitely feels more action-packed than in other turn-based games because for half of the fight, it is like an action game. You are actually having to respond to your enemy's attacks. In other turn-based games, damage to yourself is almost inevitable, but in this game, you can beat every boss encounter, every enemy without taking a single hit of damage if you're good enough. The parry system really does feel like Sekiro in the way of it's rhythm-based and you have to memorize the attacks of all your enemies. Very, very tight parry windows. The punishment for missing these parries is high. You're going to take a lot of damage. And if you miss a parry, the ending lag on the parry is so long you're probably going to get hit twice. As I mentioned before, standard attacks that come your way can be responded with a parry or a dodge. Dodging has a much bigger window of success from avoiding damage. Parrying, a lot tighter of a window. However, parrying is much more rewarding because every time you hit a parry, you gain an action point for your character, which can be used on skills in the offensive phase. As well as if you hit every single parry in an enemy's combo, you're going to respond with a counterattack, which means on an enemy's turn, they're the one taking damage, not you. There is a little risk reward because in order to get the counterattack, you absolutely have to hit every single parry in the combo. If you dodge on one of the moves or you get hit, you're not going to get the counterattack off. Some enemies have attacks where they attack every single member of your expedition, and if you can parry all of those moves, every single expeditioner will do a counterattack, and that's where you're going to get some big damage. The audio design in this game is extremely, extremely good. Every time you hit a parry or when you hit a counterattack, you are rewarded with a really nice crisp sound every time you hit it. It hits like a slot machine, really. The counterattack is also a really nice natural reward for learning an enemy's moveset. Some enemy movesets are a lot more challenging, and maybe you want to start by dodging the enemy's moves so you can kind of learn it, and then when you start to get more confident, then you can start parrying. Or you could just go balls to the wall, just parry everything right away. It's completely up to you. Most of the enemy's moves have an audio or visual cue right before they're about to strike, so sometimes before an attack lands you'll see the camera zoom out and that's your hint that you better press a button quick, or sometimes when an enemy's going to swing their weapon at you, you'll hear the wind break right before it hits you. It's just kind of another layer that helps you learn these movesets and your timings. The enemy movesets get more complicated as the game goes on, and the more parries you miss and you get punished for, the more the game will teach you that you need to be patient, you need to take these attacks slower. You really need to learn these movesets because you're going to see these movesets a lot. You need to be confident when you are parrying and counterattacking. Confidence is everything when it comes to parrying, and reaching that state of confidence is so satisfying. You can always dodge. Remember, dodging is always okay. You're not forced to parry at any time. Sometimes it is better to dodge just so you live to see another day. Later in the game, you'll be introduced to jump counters, which are attacks that you cannot parry or dodge. You must jump over them. If you try and parry and dodge, you're going to get hit. The game will let you know if a jump counter is required for the next attack because a little yellow symbol will appear, as well as you'll hear a very unique audio cue to jump counters. Then much later in the game, enemies will hit you with a gradient attack. This requires a gradient parry and only a gradient parry, which is a separate button from the parry button. You'll know one of these attacks is coming because the screen will appear black and white. That's your visual cue, and there's a unique audio cue to this as well. Dodging, parrying, jumping, and gradient parries all require a different button on the controller or your keyboard, which means you need to stay on your toes. There's no sleepwalking here, and one button wins the whole game. It really never gets stale. Not only do you need to remember which counter to be using, but you also have to be memorizing the enemy's attacks as well and their timings. You're always engaged. Then it gets really engaging when some of the late game enemies as well as the bosses start to mix all of these into their combo. You might see a boss do 2 standard attacks followed by a jump attack, then another basic attack, and then end it with a gradient attack. This whole system makes the game feel less turn-based and more action-packed, at least on the defensive side here. You will get that same rush here that you get in action games. On offense, you can take your time, strategize, choose your approach, but once it's defense time, you need to act quickly. Late game enemies as well as the bosses have lots of different combos they can do, and a lot of the combos can stretch on and on and on with many hits. Learning a lot of these movesets can be challenging, but it's also very rewarding. When you're fighting a boss and it has a 15 hit combo, and the last 10 times you've seen this combo, it absolutely wrecks you, then the moment that you do learn all these parry timings on this boss, and then you finally beat them, this will give you the sweet dopamine hit that you've been yearning for. Turn-based is boring and slow, I'm not gonna play this. You're asking me to break my 400-day streak on Warzone? That's where the current discourse is at with turn-based gaming in 2025. People say it's stuck in the 90s and it's an outdated form of gameplay at this point, but honestly, it just needs to be renovated. It just needs to be expanded upon. It just can't be a re-release from 20 years ago. I think the defensive side of this game is just such a welcome addition. It's just such a breath of fresh air within the genre. And the offensive gameplay might not be as fast-paced as the defense, but I think it's just as exhilarating. On the surface, it might look like your run-of-the-mill turn-based combat, but I found there to be a lot more depth than most other turn-based games. To start your turn on offense, you can either basic attack, use a skill, use an item, use what's called a free aim shot, and later in the game you get your own gradient attacks. A basic attack is exactly how it sounds. It's going to be just kind of chip damage when you don't have enough AP to use a skill. Basic attacks do give AP, so it's a good way to build it up so you can use a skill later. However, with modifiers in-game, you can make basic attacking even better than most of your skills with the right build. Then there's skills. And skills are going to require AP to use, but you're going to get a lot more damage out of most skills than basic attacking. And there's also passive skills, skills that buff your teammates, skills that debuff your enemies, a lot of them that don't do damage. There's even a lot of unique skills, like there's a skill that you can use that makes all enemies damage you instead of your teammates. There's another skill where you can use it on a teammate and it'll double the damage on their next turn. In order to gain AP to use these skills, there's actually quite a few ways, but the most common you're going to run into is hitting parries, using a basic attack, or using an item. Every party member has their own unique skills, and the best builds require you to chain different skills back to back, setting up big damage. For example, the character Lune has a skill that causes enemies to burn. Then after that, on her next turn, she has another skill that if she hits an enemy that's burning, she can gain AP and play a second turn. There is a lot of depth here on how to use your skills and what order you could be using them. That's just one of many, many examples. Every skill that you use requires you to execute button prompts for maximum effectiveness. There's also, of course, items that can be used on your turn. There's 3 in particular that you can use. One heals yourself or an ally, one provides AP to yourself or an ally, and the third one revives a dead teammate. These items restock themselves every single time you rest, so you don't have to worry about hoarding them and having 80 potions in your inventory because you're afraid you might need to use one later. And I love that. I'm that kind of player. One of the more creative features in the offensive combat in this game, in my opinion, is the free aim shot. That's right, you do have access to the blicky in this game. On your turn, you can go into third person mode and just start blasting. And the best part, it doesn't even use your turn. It just uses 1 AP per shot. You can shoot a couple times and then you can still choose to attack or use an item or a skill after shooting on the same turn. Free aim shooting is very useful for some builds because there are a lot of skills and modifiers that benefit from free aim shots. Some modifiers increasing the damage or applying burn when you shoot. There are some enemies who fly and can only be damaged from free aim shots consistently. When you try to attack them with something else, there's a very high probability that they'll dodge your attack. So you have to blast them. And a lot of the other enemies have weak spots on them that you can exploit by shooting them, and they'll end up taking a lot of damage or you can stop them from using a really powerful attack. This is an addition to the gameplay that I absolutely love. I've never seen this in a turn-based game. I think it's a really cool, fresh addition. And this is already a game of strategizing and choosing your approach. This only adds to the strategy. Much later in the game, you're going to gain access to what's called a gradient attack. These skills are much better than anything else you can do in the game, but it takes a while to build them up. These gradient attacks kind of remind me of Final Fantasy VII's limit breaks. Each party member has 3 unique ones, and typically each one you unlock is better than the one before. You'll gain access to a gradient charge bar, and every time you use a skill, that bar will fill up a little bit. And then after a while, you'll have 1. And then if you keep it going, you'll have 2. And you can have a maximum of 3 charges. Some gradient attacks require 1 charge, then there's some that require 2, and then the best ones require you to fill it up 3 times and use the whole thing. There's some modifiers that can be used where if you use a basic attack, it'll charge the gradient bar, or if you use an item, it'll charge it a little bit. There was a character that I built that did basic attacking basically every turn, and I attached a modifier to him that every time he performed a basic attack, he would charge the gradient bar up. Gradient attacks are absolutely game-changing, and after you use them, you get a free second turn right after. Once you unlock these, you want to be using them. This game has so much variety in how you approach combat, but that's not even where it ends. You unlock 6 party members throughout the game, and each one of them has a completely unique mechanic and playstyle. For example, you start off with Gustav, and he has the Overcharge mechanic. Overcharge is a skill that he has that does big damage and can stun your enemy. However, in order to execute this attack effectively, you need to build up 10 charges. In order to build his charges, you need to use his other skills that slowly build them up. So the basic strategy with him is use a bunch of skills that gain charges fast, and then use overcharge as soon as you have 10. In my opinion, this is the best starting character mechanic because it is so simple and straightforward. Later on, with the other party members, they get a little more complicated, so this gives you a chance to not only learn the basic combat mechanics, but also one of the more simple character mechanics at the same time. The second party member you gain access to is Lune, and she has the stains mechanic. There are 5 different types of stains you can access with her, which are the fire, earth, lightning, ice, and the light stain. The first 4 I mentioned are obviously all attached to one of the 4 elemental attacks that she can use. Then lastly, there's the light stain that acts as a wild card and can be used in one of the spots of any of the 4 stains. Each one of her skills generates these stains. For example, if you use a fire move, you're going to gain fire stains. Every single one of her skills also consumes stains, and if you can consume the correct stains, you'll get an added effect or bonus damage. The best Lune builds has you creating a chain of attacks that all play off of each other, so you can kind of go in a cycle so you always get those bonus effects. There's even a blue mage character who gains skills from defeating enemies, and each one of his skills has him turning into those enemies and doing their own attacks, as opposed to a regular skill tree for the other characters. The creativity is unmatched with how unique they make all these characters feel with their own playstyles. There are 4 other playable characters you get besides Gustav and Lune, but I'll let you learn their playstyles on your own because it is just extremely fun to play these characters since they all play so differently. This might all sound overwhelming, but they really do drip feed you at a nice pace when unlocking these characters. Typically, you have enough time to kind of learn a character's playstyle before you unlock another one, and then you learn that character's mechanics before another one is given to you. On top of that, every character has a selection of their own unique weapons. Each weapon does a different elemental damage, and most weapons have their own unique passives that completely change up the gameplay. You have to keep in mind that every enemy has resistances and weaknesses to different elements. Some enemies can even absorb elements that you throw at them to heal themselves. So never be afraid to swap weapons in and out. Matching these weapon passives with the skills you're provided with each character is a great way to start theory crafting a build. When you eventually find yourself creating a decent build, you might want to consider, do I want all my characters to be their own thing, powerful just on their own? Or do I want a team synergy where all 3 of them are trying to achieve the same goal? For example, you could be going for a burn build, where you build one character to apply a ton of burn. Or you could have all 3 of your characters go for the same goal, where maybe the first character applies burn, the second character does more damage to targets when they're burning, and maybe the third character can consume that burn to do more damage. The true cherry on top when it comes to building these characters in your team are the modifiers that I mentioned earlier. These modifiers are known as Pictos and Lumina. If you've ever played Final Fantasy IX, think of the way that the weapons and armor work in that game. where if you wear the armor or use the weapon in battle 4 times, you'll unlock that passive for it. Yes, you can always have that weapon on and gain that passive for one character, but once you do 4 battles and unlock the passive on its own, you can attach it to all your characters, and every single character in your party can have the same passive at the same time. Pictos and Lumina work in the exact same way. You find a Picto and it has a passive on it that you like, you attach it to one of your party members, that party member battles 4 times with it in battle and eventually unlocks it as a Lumina. Once it's a Lumina, you can attach it to multiple, if not all of your characters, and whoever you attach it to gets that same passive. You can attach 3 Pictos per character, and Pictos also provide you with stat boosts. The Picto contains a stat boost and a passive, but once you learn it as a Lumina, you only get the passive. You need to have Pictos specifically for stat boosts. There is a wide variety of what these passives can be. Some of them are simple, such as maybe every turn you gain 1 extra AP. Maybe on a free aim shot you do 50% more damage. But some of them get even more unique and even more powerful. There's one Picto that allows you to play 2 turns in a row. There's another one that allows you to resurrect if you die once per battle. You find so many of these Pictos throughout the game that you're encouraged to constantly be swapping them in and out to test them out, because as you go through the game, the Pictos you find later in the game are going to have better stat boosts. You're going to want to put those on anyway to make your character stronger, and then you can test out how a passive works. Swapping these Pictos in and out as you play encourages you to find new and better builds for your characters as well, without you really even realizing it at first. Then you might find passives that are so good you want all of your characters to have them. For example, there's an enemy later in the game that inflicts you with the status effect called Blight. In that same area, you can find a Picto that makes your character immune to Blight. Of course, you can only attach this Picto to one character, so you would attach it, do the 4 battles and learn it as a Lumina, and then you could attach it to all your party members, and it'll make those Blight fights in the area much easier. As I mentioned before, each character can attach 3 Pictos at once, but the Lumina are seemingly endlessly equipable. The way that Lumina works is each Lumina has a point value associated with it, and typically the better passives have a lot higher points on them. Each character you have also has a cap limit to how many points they can use at one time. There are these items called Color of Lumina that you can find throughout the game, and if you give them to one of your characters, their cap ceiling raises, meaning more Lumina that you can attach to them at one time. The amount of Lumina points that each character can hold at the beginning of the game is kind of low. You only can attach, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 passives per character near the beginning, but as you play, you unlock more Luminas, you unlock more colors of Lumina that increases your cap ceiling, and eventually you could have 40, 50, 60 passives on a character, even more if you really want to. If you really theory craft hard enough with these Lumina, as well as the weapons and the skills you're given, you really can make a god squad here. I really never thought I would have so much fun navigating through menus for 30 minutes to an hour at a time, but when you build these characters to the best that they can be and you see them flourish in battle because of that, it's just such a nice, natural reward. It really feels great to watch all your hard work pay off when you have so many Luminas on your character and you attack with that character and you see all of those Luminas activating at the same time. You get so many Lumina by the end game that I recommend just using your 3 Picto spots as stat increases. Whatever stats you really want to build on a specific character, just find the highest ones for that and attach them, and then use all your Luminas for your passives. For example, I had a character where they absolutely relied on having a 100% crit rate. I needed crits to land every single time for this build to work. So every passive I wanted them to have, I had them in the Lumina, and then I put every extremely high crit rate Picto on them to get their crit rate to 100%. You can spend literal hours in the menus theory crafting, and if you're a psychopath like me, you're going to find a lot of enjoyment in that. And there's just so much variety that if you ask your friend how he built Gustav, it might be completely different from how you did. While each character does contain their core fundamentals, there's so much build variety here that you can turn the same character 100 different ways. Because of this system, you really can min-max to the absolute extreme. Basically what min-maxing means is optimizing your character to their fullest potential and absolutely breaking them. As stated before, there is absolutely no limit to how many Lumina each character can have. So if you go out and farm, and you'd have to farm a lot, you could put every passive on every character if you really tried hard enough, becoming the hydrogen bomb to the coughing babies that are the late game bosses. For those that love doing this, having that barbaric power fantasy, just absolutely go for it. The developers want you to if that's what you want to do. They made it this way on purpose. However, in my opinion, if you really want to get the most out of this game, just try not to do this. I'm not saying not to make your characters as good as you can make them, but just stay off Google. You're going to find builds that absolutely break your characters, and then you're not going to have any fun. You're going to wipe out every enemy and every boss in one hit, and then are you even really playing the game? Not only that, but if you start Googling things, you're going to get some massive story spoilers potentially, and you do not want to ruin this story for yourself. If you min-max, you're not going to encounter all the unique combat encounters that this game throws at you, and you're not going to have those moments where you have 1 HP left and your teammates are dead and you need to hit every dodge and parry perfectly or your run's over. Those tense moments that the story builds up, these battles aren't going to live up to that same tension. I'm not saying to nerf yourself either. You should build your characters how you want to build them. But this story is meant to be a perilous journey. It's supposed to be dangerous. If you want the immersive experience, it really should feel that way. You're going to suck out all the fun. You're going to be copy-pasting character builds instead of having the satisfaction of building these characters yourself and making them your own. The complexity of the offensive and defensive gameplay is so satisfying and fun to learn that I think it's worth soaking in. There's even a chance that you'll break the characters on your own. In the late game, I built a character so well that I was one-shotting Superbosses and I had to take her out of fights so I could go back in and overcome the struggle and get the satisfaction out of the boss fight. I will be getting into this specific point more when I talk about the negatives about the game for me. I'm no dictator, obviously. Play the game how you want to play the game. Do what's ever the most fun for you. I'm just speaking from someone who's played the game and beaten it multiple times now, and how I found the most enjoyment out of it. To get a somewhat decent start on your build, you are going to want to build around some kind of specialty, whether that be focusing on breaking your target or burning them. When I spoke on Team Synergy, I mentioned a burn build earlier. With that, you could attach a bunch of weapons that apply burn or do more damage if the target is burning, and you could stack on a bunch of Lumina passives that help with burning, that apply burn. After this, you'll kind of naturally develop some sort of what I would call a offensive flow state. Like I said before, you could have a character that applies burn and another character after could consume the burn or play off of that burn. The second move would naturally flow from the first move. To reach this flow state, you kind of want each character to play off of themselves, maybe set up a move on their own and then capitalize on it when it's their turn again. Or you could have the team flow, where you set up a move for your next player to capitalize on that one. There's individual player flow, and then there's team flow. You could have a break build, where one character applies a bunch of break damage, and then the next character actually breaks to stun the target, and then you could have a third character use skills that do more damage to targets that are already broken. Or you could have one character that just does all that on their own, and they're actively trying to break the target. Then you could have your second character actively trying to burn the target. The choice is yours. Every character has a ton of different skills they can learn, but you only can have 6 active skills that you can use on at once. You can mix and match them however you like. A character's flow state is going to contain a bunch of these skills, where maybe you set up with one skill and then you follow up with a second skill, and then once you kind of build something up, you can unleash your most powerful attack, which is your third skill, 3 steps in a flow that you're kind of currently trying to work through. It is really fun to mess with these flows because each character might be trying to accomplish a different goal, and you play as each character in turns. So you start with your first guy, and then you go second, and then third. You'll play with your first character and you go, oh, I need to try and build up break damage with this character. And then you'll switch up to the second character and you'll do their setup move. And the battle will just kind of flow naturally until you get back to your first character again, and you'll be going, oh yeah, that's what I was doing. I was trying to break with this first character. Let me continue that flow. You're doing so many different things at once in a single battle that your brain is always getting tickled. You are never limited to one single kind of flow or using one set of specific skills. As you unlock more of the skill tree, there's much more that you can experiment with and make your build even better. The offense will always stay engaging as long as you're always staying experimenting and trying new things. Every character is so viable in so many different ways that it makes it fun to experiment. For example, there's a character named CL, and in my first playthrough, I had her dealing loads and loads of damage. She was one of my primary damage dealers. And in the second playthrough I did, I went full support. All 6 of her skills dealt with support. I almost never did damage with her, just applying buffs, giving AP, all sorts of things like that. She was really phenomenal at doing both of those things, and every character can be phenomenal at anything if you build them correctly. There's absolutely no wrong way to build a character. Sometimes you just need to fling shit at the wall and see what happens. Just experiment. You might think once you reach a really optimal flow state that you like, and you have the perfect setup for everything and the perfect payoff in battle, and you're getting a nice rhythm going, that it's going to start making the offense feel formulaic. It'll make it feel like you're just spamming the same thing all the time and repeating the same attacks every battle. I really think that's the furthest thing from the truth, though, because one, the enemy variety is so crazy and they operate so differently, and the different combat encounters can be so unique. You get thrown so many different scenarios in all these battles. Not every battle is just there's an enemy and they'll hit you and you can do whatever you want to them. Kill enemy, move on, kill enemy, move on. But that's not how it is. Some enemies will apply shields to themselves, and for every shield they have on them, that's one attack that they can take without taking any damage. So you might have to interrupt your current flow state that you're on to maybe shoot them a couple times or hit them with an attack that does multiple hits to get rid of the shield. And then if you're going to do that, you're going to interrupt your current flow state. You might encounter a bunch of flying enemies that can only consistently be hit with free aim shots. And if you're using a bunch of free aim shots, you're going to use all your AP, and then you're not going to be able to use the skills you were going to use on your flow. There is enough adversity that you face, enough challenges that the game throws at you, that you have to try and solve the immediate problem sometimes, and that means straying away from the current flow that you have. Your offensive approach is always going to have to be changing, because if you have to go and solve one of these immediate problems, it's going to set you in a different place in your flow. You might have to start the flow differently. Maybe you have Lune and you're setting up a certain amount of stains to do your best attack, but you need to start blasting off free aim shots to hit these enemies, or you need to use a different move that consume your stains and give you new ones, and then you're set with a whole another list of stains that you weren't intending on having, and then your flow just kind of starts from a different area. There are going to be moments where you encounter enemies that are immune to some of your attacks, and then you're not going to be able to set up the flow that you originally wanted to do. There's going to be moments where you're trying to go for the optimal flow, but your allies get hurt and die, and then you might have to spend a turn reviving or healing them instead of continuing your flow, and that's just going to interrupt things. It's throwing a wrench into the operation. I hope this is sort of making sense, but basically I'm just saying that you're going to encounter challenges, and these challenges are not going to allow you to just spam the same moves all the time. These challenges make every enemy encounter feel very unique, and it's going to have you reevaluating your strategy in real time. When these challenges arise, you're going to have to think about the scenario in which you're in. You have to consider which party member plays next. How many of them are dead? Weigh out the pros and cons of, should I buff my next character because their attack is going to be nice, or should I just attack myself? Should I heal them because they're low on health, or should I gamble and hit them with my best attack and try to dodge the incoming enemy attack? It's decisions like this that you're not going to be able to make in other turn-based games, because most of the time, damage is inevitable in those games. It's the little things like this that add so many layers to the turn-based combat, and for me, it just makes it feel much more in-depth than most of the other games like this. You're going to end up getting to a point where you're just kind of playing out every scenario in your head and choosing your best option. These scenarios are going to have you paying attention to everything. Which of my enemies are marked? Which ones have status effects? Do I have any status effects? Which enemies are closest to breaking? Which enemies are closest to dead? Which of my characters is closest to their best attack within their flow? Are there any of my teammates that are low on AP? Maybe they should be the ones that uses a healing item instead of this character, and this character can attack, this one can heal. I forgot to mention earlier that gradient attacks are shared. If you have one charge on your gradient meter, only one character can use that and the other characters can't. It's a shared bar. So you have to consider, which gradient attack should I use in this scenario? Which character should be the one that uses it? Your confidence level fighting these enemies is important, because some enemies you're going to be better at avoiding damage from than others. Some enemies might just have your number. How badly do you want to gamble against a certain enemy versus another enemy? You're allowed to have 6 skills per character, so maybe you want to have 3 or 4 that focus on a certain flow, and then maybe 1 or 2 backup moves that allow you to kind of improv in case a different challenge arises that where you'll need it, because challenges will arise. One example of a crazy scenario, there's a boss later in the game. Very, very tiny minor spoiler. He has lamps attached to him, and these 4 lamps in between his turns will light up in a different order, and you have to go into free aim mode and shoot these lamps in the correct order. If you shoot them out of order, you're going to fail, and he's going to unleash a very powerful attack against you. But if you can shoot them in the correct order, that powerful attack is interrupted. That's just one example of many of the combat encounters you're going to see in this game. Scenarios like this do 2 things at once. They're providing you with a new, unique combat encounter that's memorable, as well as forcing you to mix up your strategy and your flow to do something different. Oh crap, I didn't even notice you fall. Get back on your throne, King. We're not even close to done yet. There's so many moving parts to the offensive side of the ball here that it might sound overwhelming. Despite all the yapping that I just did about it, trust me, it really isn't overwhelming. The game teaches you all these mechanics very slowly and very clearly. This game is a very good teacher of itself. I really like when a game drip feeds you information and mechanics over time, because not only does it keep you from getting overwhelmed, but it keeps the gameplay fresh as well. The gameplay loop of mastering the last mechanic you learned about and then being introduced to the next one is just something that'll keep your brain tickled throughout. The nice blend from going back to defensive action-packed gameplay to the strategic offensive gameplay keeps you strategizing on the fly depending on what's happening, and it's just fun to go back and forth between 2 fun gameplay styles. As stated before, you can optimize everything to your liking, so you could be one punch man or you can be a pea shooter and everything in between. Since you can completely avoid damage, you can tailor make your experience exactly how you want according to that spectrum. The type that want to min-max, the type that want to stay as weak as possible to create challenge, and everyone in between. There's even a ton of depth to the enemies here. I mean, look at the enemy design. Look at how they look. They're all so unique and different and follow such a cool art style. All of their movesets are just so satisfying to learn and also different from one another. You will be seeing these enemies a lot, and I personally love the combat in this game, so I fought every enemy that I came across. So you will learn these movesets. It is amazing to feel the progression from fighting your first enemy type all the way to the last. From how many times you fight them, you master every move that they throw at you, when early on they were annihilating you every time it was their turn. But do not be fooled. In the early game, a lot of the enemies are easy. They only have 1 or 2, maybe 3 different combos that they can throw at you, with maybe 1 or 2 hits apiece. But the farther you get into the game, some of these enemies have 6, 7 different combos that they can do to you. 4, 5, 6, sometimes up to 18 different hits in one combo that you have to memorize. Early game enemies will throw very clearly telegraphed attacks at you, but later in the game, you're going to be getting a lot of these weird, awkward timings that just don't feel right, where you have to memorize exactly the audio or visual cue coming in at you. Like I said before, some fly and you have to shoot them. Some have many shields that you have to get through. There's some scenarios where an enemy will eat one of your party members and then you're just stuck with 2 of them. I can't tell you how much I love that these enemies just aren't copy-paste from one another. Every enemy feels so different. Specific enemies will apply specific status effects to you, such as Silence, which doesn't allow you to use any skills, or Exhaust, which doesn't let you gain AP. There's a certain boss later in the game that curses you, and when you're cursed, you die in a certain amount of turns, kind of like Perish Song. Sandfall does such a good job of keeping things from feeling repetitive, introducing fresh, new takes on different enemies as the game progresses. Later in the game, when you encounter some of the harder enemies, they're going to have multiples of these traits, combos with jumps and gradient parries in it. They'll absorb certain elements, they'll have shields, maybe they also fly all at once. This makes the party of characters that you choose, as well as the Pictos, the Lumina, the skills you choose, the weapons, all important for every single encounter, because you might have characters built different to take on different enemies. The game makes you think. You can't just sleepwalk through the whole game using the same characters with the same Pictos all the time. A lot of the most fun boss fights in this game appear multiple times, and it works within the lore without feeling shoehorned in. This solves the FromSoft problem, locking a bunch of the best high-quality boss fights in gaming behind another 30 or 40-hour playthrough. The only way to avoid another playthrough of Dark Souls 3 just to fight Slave Knight Gale is to save scum. But here, a lot of these bosses appear several times, as well as in the Endless Tower, which we'll talk about later, but you can redo Endless Tower battles where these bosses remain. This game also features what's called chromatic boss fights, which are the regular enemies but a souped-up boss version of those enemies. It's the true and final test of how well you know the basic enemies, because a lot of the chromatic boss fights have the same combos of the original enemies they're based on, but maybe with 2 or 3 more hits in the combo added on. A lot of the combos don't feel like having to learn an entirely new move, though, because it's just a slightly tweaked version of an old move or a slightly longer version of the old move. A really cool and subtle touch that I love is that when you encounter an enemy, you typically fight them in the immediate area. In the surrounding area, you can typically see items that haven't been picked up yet, just right there while you're battling. You can see NPCs that are waiting to be talked to sometimes. It's just the little tiny touches of love that they sprinkle in. Things that they did not have to add, but they did because they thought it would enhance the experience. Like at the end of some boss fights, you're greeted with an epic cutscene where the characters take down the boss. It transitions from the battle into the cutscene so seamlessly. To wrap up this big yap sesh about how much I really enjoy the combat in this game, I just have to say that this is my favorite turn-based combat system that I personally have ever played. In my 70 or so hours to 100% the game on my first playthrough, as well as the several other playthroughs I've done since then, it has not gotten boring once. They just really do a good job of making it fun to fight things in this game, man. It's deep, it requires you to think, it requires you to theory craft. The defense, it requires a lot of skill, and it's just difficult enough to be satisfying as hell. Hey, we're still in the gameplay section, okay? And there's more gameplay to be had here than just within battle. When you're outside of battle, you have an entire world map to be exploring. There's a lot to be done in the overworld, and the overworld also contains doorways to side areas and levels. In my opinion, the overworld is the perfect size. It's not like a lot of open world games where you're exploring an overly large map, yet it feels hollow with very little to do in it. It also doesn't have that Ubisoft open world feel where everything feels like a checklist. You're just kind of accomplishing things for the sake of accomplishing them, even though the content is just very bare bones. The overworld itself is very inspired, obviously, by PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy overworld maps, where everything is very bite-sized and you are a much larger version of your actual self. This doesn't take the immersion away for me. It just very much feels like a video game. It feels very much fun first. I don't need to be a tiny size for it to feel immersive. I don't need the world to feel bigger and more empty in that way. And it really doesn't feel checklisty or hollow because the levels within the overworld are packed with things to do. Each level, even the individual side areas, have so much identity to them. There's just so much character in this art style and world design. The world looks so amazing and, most importantly, unique and different from other things that we've seen that sometimes I just caught myself standing there and just looking at everything. Even outside of the levels in the core overworld, there's so many secrets to find, there's so many unique enemies to fight. Similar to PS1 Final Fantasies, there is kind of a natural progression to how you open up the map. In the beginning, you're going to start out on foot and you have no way to cross the water, but eventually through progression of the story, you're going to be able to cross the sea. And then eventually you're going to get up to those sky islands high up when you get the ability to fly. Similar to in classic Final Fantasy, when you eventually find a boat and eventually find a plane. You really get that sense of game progression when the map feels bigger and bigger the more it opens up when you get these forms of travel. Oh, you want to cross the sea and head over to that island you see in the distance? Go into the cave and get your face smashed in by the boss waiting for you in there? Sorry, you're a little too underleveled for that right now. Speaking of which, you will come across areas in the overworld that you are very much underleveled for. Since it's possible to complete every fight without getting hit, it does open you up to a really fun challenge, but some enemies are worth saving for later at times. I'm sort of a glutton for punishment myself. I really do like to fight these enemies way earlier than you're meant to. However, these enemies do teach you an important lesson that you can carry across many other games. If this challenge over here or even this one over here are just simply too difficult, you can go elsewhere and level up and come back later. It's a natural teaching tool without having to prompt you with a menu or a tutorial. It's the same lesson that the Tree Sentinel taught you when you walked out into Limgrave in Elden Ring for the first time and got your face smashed in a couple dozen times, causing you to leave and get better loot. Even when you master the movesets of some of these horribly difficult enemies early on, you only take off like a pubic hair sized part of their health every time you hit them, so you're going to be inside this battle for 20-30 minutes and one slip up and you're done. Within the actual condensed levels, you could find flags that were left by previous expeditions where you can rest at and heal and refill all your items, but at the cost of respawning all of the enemies in the area. Very soulsy in that way. In between these flags, you can explore the levels, fight all sorts of new combat encounters in between. You can find all sorts of new pictos to learn. Roaming the levels kind of reminds me of the same gameplay of God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok, but with a lot less puzzle elements, even though they are there. There is nothing more rewarding than killing a really hard enemy and then picking up the picto that they were guarding behind them and then mentally kind of crossing off that pathway and moving on. The game, of course, rewards you for exploring. You're going to find all sorts of weapons that may have an element that'll benefit you in that area because the enemies are weak to it. You might find a picto that directly assists you in the area, maybe has you immune to a status effect of a lot of the enemies around. You only start with one of each of the three items and they're pretty weak early on, but as you explore you'll find more of those items so you can use more and more in between refreshes, and you'll find upgrades for those items. So maybe instead of recovering 10% health, you can upgrade it with an item you find and recover 50% health. But it's not just all side levels. There's also just little side areas with a side quest to do. There's mini-game areas. These minigame areas are known as the Gestrel Beaches. What Gestrels are, it's this species that live on the continent that almost resemble wooden toys. They're very much the comic relief of the game. They're just kind of stupid and they're there to have fun. And they very, very much love battling. You will be battling a lot of them. They are actually humorous enough at times to actually get me giggling. I mean, it's not that kind of MCU level of comedy writing. All of the merchants in the game, where you can buy new weapons and pictos, they are gestrels, and in order for you to unlock their best items, you need to best them in battle. They love battling because they consider it therapeutic, almost like meditating. Anyway, a little off topic. The Gestrel Beaches themselves, you'll find a Gestrel that provides you with some kind of minigame, and if you can beat the minigame, you'll be rewarded with an outfit for one of your characters. Most of the time it's going to be a swimsuit, so have fun, Gooners. These areas really are a nice, easygoing break from the absolute heartbreak that is the main story. It's nice to just not be depressed in this game for once. Although I'm not going to say they're relaxing because the mini games themselves are kind of hard and some of which are even very frustrating. If you know, you know. There's a variety of mini games on these beaches. You have one where you're playing volleyball, where you're hitting a gestural child back and forth. There's another one that is a climbing challenge that is so tall it's going to put the Burj Khalifa to shame. The main story takes roughly 30 hours-ish if you're just going straight through, but with so much to do and so much to see, you could spend a lot more hours than that in this world, and it will be enjoyable the whole way through. As mentioned before, there's also a lot of smaller areas with some sort of side objective. There's several side quests, which I'll dive deeper into later, but they're essentially the enemy types that you're fighting throughout the game, but they're different, they're friendly, and they have a request for you, and you can help them out and get rewards. There's also tons of collectibles to find, logs from previous expeditions that they left. Very interesting logs at that. A lot of ones that question the politics that is the expedition. A lot of them that are just very depressing. Some of them heartwarming where they're accepting their fate. Some abandon their mission and accept a new life out in the continent. Some of the logs are even hilarious. I mean, seriously, collect these and actually listen to them. It really, really helps with the world building in this game. You can also find collectible music records that you can play at camp that are direct songs from the soundtrack in this game. And trust me, the soundtrack is so good, you'll want to be blasting these into your ears. And what better time than now to get into the music? Oh my god, let's talk about the music. The soundtrack was created by one person. His name is Lorian Testard, and to my knowledge, he's never been credited on any video game soundtrack before. He's a guitar teacher that posted some video game music onto an online forum. Sandfall found this exact forum and hired him on to create the whole thing. And it only makes it more impressive the fact that the soundtrack is an absolute slapper. I'm talking best video game soundtrack I've ever heard in my life. I'm talking having the soundtrack on Spotify in the car. Apparently, this forum that was posted only had like 10 replies on it. The chain of events for this soundtrack to be in this game were just so minuscule. It's that Doctor Strange 1 in 14 million type thing. It takes opera vocals, mixes them with strings, a lot of modern synths, and just mixes them into this French soup that just works so well. I'm serious. This soundtrack made me create an entire Spotify playlist of my favorite video game songs of all time, and half of the entire playlist is songs from this game. I've been bumping at least one of the songs in this soundtrack probably once a day. What I really appreciate about this soundtrack not only has bangers, but the songs also fit the vibe within the game when they're played extremely well. It's just so thoughtfully created. I mean, you have really fun and easygoing songs that play in gestural beaches, and whenever you're talking to gestrals, you have really dreary and melancholic music that plays in some of the more depressing and dangerous parts of the game. Even the boss theme songs are just super intense, and it ramps up the fight in such a cool way. Even the main party, as well as some other side characters, have their own theme songs in this game. And of course, their themes fit how they are as a character. It fits the character writing and the tone of the character very well. There are so many songs here. Each individual area, including even a lot of the smaller areas, have their own dedicated roaming theme, as well as enemy themes for that area, and even their own boss theme. In fact, a lot of the roaming music within levels share a lot of melodies and instruments and general sounds as the battle music of the same area. You'll really notice it when you're roaming around in a level and then you enter a battle and you hear the two tracks blend into each other. A good example of this is in the area Stonewave Cliffs. One of the two roaming themes is called The Last Thing You'll See, and Warding Blades is the battle theme for that area. And if you just listen to both, there's a lot of similarities. The game also has a cool feature called Adaptive Music, which means the current music will change depending on the events in-game, but the track will still stay consistent with itself, but it will change at that point in the track. An example of this, there's an area much later in the game where there is a giant creature kind of in the middle of the area, and you hear this song with this beautiful singing. And when you enter the caves of the area and you can't see the creature anymore, it's the same song, but instead of the singing, there's a guitar melody. And when shifting back and forth between these areas, the new song will start where the last song left off instead of completely restarting. It seems like such a simple thing, but that's probably a bitch to program into the game, and it's just such a nice addition that adds to the immersion. Spoiler ahead for just area names, I want to talk about my favorite tracks in the game. My favorite tracks include Rain from the Ground, which is the Flying Waters boss fight. There's Divided Swords, which is one of the two battle themes in the Forgotten Battlefield. I love We Lost, but who doesn't love We Lost? I also love the battle theme in the Reacher area. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the title of that song, but it's fantastic. Give it a listen. There's Portrait Imparfait, which is the Visage Island boss fight. And my favorite theme is the Duelist boss fight song. Une vie à t'aimer. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but I'm not going to try and pronounce that either. The transition from cutscene into battle with that last song is just absolutely something else. Again, if you know, you know, absolute chills. And that really is scratching the surface. There's 180 songs, 190 songs in this soundtrack, with so many more memorable ones. Some of the songs, a lot of the biggest bangers, have guest vocals from an opera singer named Alice Dupart-Pircier. I apologize for that one as well. She is extremely talented and adds so much to every track that she's a part of. I mean, just tremendously. Just like the tracks themselves, her beautiful and sometimes haunting voice adds so much to the current vibe of the situation happening in-game. I'm not even kidding here. This is the first game I have ever went into the volume sliders menu ever, and I actually decreased all the other volume knobs so the music would be at 100%. And yes, I used headphones, and I recommend using headphones too, because when these songs are blasting in your ears like a jet engine, there's nothing like it. I probably damaged my hearing, but it was unfortunately well worth it. The music will completely immerse you as if you are in the game. And when you're wearing headphones and you hear those crisp parry and counterattack audio cues, all the tight sound design in this game, it only makes it better. Sound design and music, both of which very elite. When I was writing the Let's Face It too long script for this video, I constantly had the soundtrack playing in the background as I was typing it up. When I was playing the game and recording footage, I would stop to take notes on my phone of things I wanted to add to the script, and then I would just sit there and get lost in the music. I've seen a lot of people, including a buddy of mine who just recently played the game, say they had to stop in the middle of a battle and just listen to the music. It is that good, and I can relate to that, honestly. I would love to play a couple tracks for you on here, but this is the first video I've ever made, and I'm not very familiar with how YouTube's copyright system works, and I really don't feel like having YouTube send a hitman to my house, but trust me, even if you're not going to play this game, first of all, shame on you. But second, even if you're not, just go give a few tracks a listen. Every individual track is just so creative with its melodies and the production itself. Lorian here is an absolute mastermind. As if the game wasn't a masterpiece already, this guy put the most perfect, tastiest cherry on top. Seriously, whenever you're just playing the game, just sit and stop and listen to the music. You'll start floating. If I encountered a genie, I would probably use all three wishes to guarantee that Sandfall brings him back to record the next OST for their next game. Seriously, Lorian, you deserve a Grammy. I think I'm so in love with this world because, I mean, look at it. The world has so much character to it on top of being graphically beautiful. There's an area in the game called the Flying Waters where you can see coral reefs and bubbles raising to the sky. It looks like you're walking on the ocean floor, but you're not. You see all sorts of sea creatures flying throughout the sky as if they're swimming. There's another area called the Forgotten Battlefield. It's on this shore where you'll see dozens of crashed expeditioner ships. Then you go through this gate, and once in there, you see a large battlefield where there's just piles and piles of tens of thousands of expeditioners. Every area has a breathtaking atmosphere and is so rich in lore, especially when accompanied by the soundtrack that fits each area so well. I love how unique this world feels. It's not just, let's place a generic forest here. Let's have a volcano area, a lava castle here. No, they're just completely original ideas for locations. The distinctive art style here is very, very intentional. You can almost always see, no matter the area you're in, the paintress and her monolith out in the distance. She's a looming threat, always constantly reminding you of the mission. It's always so cool when you can always see the final destination of where you're trying to go in game, and the farther in the game you go, the closer and closer you get to it. It's just super cool. I love how they even make the side levels so important to the story. It just makes the world feel so much more connected. The side areas don't feel separate because the side areas also add lore that enhance the main story. I absolutely love how they set up the level progression throughout the story as well. You start off in this beautiful meadow, and then you move on to the flying water area with all sorts of cool visuals to look at. Then you enter a forest with all sorts of cute little funny gestrels. Then after this, you enter headfirst into a dreary, sad, rainy, dangerous cliffside. And then after this, you enter a battlefield with tons and tons of dead bodies everywhere. As the story gets more intense, you feel that intensity because the areas progressively get more intense and heavy. The closer you inch towards the monolith, the more serious and dangerous the expedition becomes. Okay, new day, new recording session. I hope the camera angle is exactly the same. It is most definitely not. My apologies. Not doing this all in one day. Anyway, since we're currently appreciating my amazing camera skills, what a perfect transition to get into the art direction. Every enemy's visual design feels so intentional, like the creation enemy, whose body is entirely made up of corpses. These enemies also fit very well into their respective areas because of their visual design as well as from a lore perspective. Another little pipsqueak baby spoiler incoming. There's an island later in the story that you go to where the island's landscape is just full of faces. There's faces everywhere. And the enemies in this area have masks on them. One of them has a shield that is a face, which is symbolic in its own way. There's another area where a lot of the landscape is woven together with fabric, and a lot of the enemies in the area look like they were created and woven together out of fabric. Every area in the game is just so lifelike, yet surreal at the same time. Here's something that I want to show you. I haven't seen a ton of people bring this up, but it's definitely worth mentioning. Just take a look at this. When it's your turn in battle, these visual effects just kind of pop off of your menus. It almost looks like paint is just kind of splashing off of your skill and attack and item prompts. There's also tons of just cool visuals and colors and light effects that pop off of your weapon when you move it in battle. I'm just trying to emphasize that nothing here is bland. They went the extra mile just to add these tiny little details that really make the game stand out. Grand concepts, a masterfully put together story, great game mechanics, they can really truly make a good game great. But it's little tiny details like this of just added love that turn a great game into a masterpiece. You can visually see the little bits of love that they added to this game. Things so subtle that just don't need to be there, but they added to the game because they wanted to make the game great. And I can't even describe how sick I am of this obsession over hyper-realistic graphics. I've played a ridiculous amount of games that look lifelike, super realistic, and then they end up being pieces of shit. High realistic graphics are like frosting to the cake, if you will. It just does not make a great game. It can definitely add to a great game, but it's never ever been a factor in what makes a game truly great. On the opposite side of the coin, I've played a ton of 10 out of 10 games where the characters in game look like some shapes out of my geometry textbook. For example, look how fantastic Mario 64 is, or the original Ocarina of Time, or even the OG Final Fantasy VII. These crazy graphics just maybe aren't for me. If I want hyper-realistic graphics, I'll go outside and actually touch grass. For me, it's a game's art style, something that really stands out against everything else. That's what really stands the test of time. It's the same reason games like Wind Waker still look amazing to this day, even though it came out 20 years ago. Expedition 33, in my opinion, has one of these unforgettable, truly unique, full of character art styles. Yet, despite everything I just said, Expedition 33 also looks hyper-realistic and beautiful graphically. So, it's a win-win for everyone. I've glazed how amazing and full of character this world looks, yet the world is also so rich in lore as well. The writing attached to the setting is great. It really adds to set a solid foundation for the story as well as the setting itself. Without even knowing the story, just taking in visually everything you see in this world, you can tell there's a history here. You can tell that this place is lived in. When you're playing the game, you'll ask yourself, where did these creatures come from? Why are these locations located where they are? What happened in these locations? Why did the world fracture the way it did? Who is the paintress? Why is she doing this? These lands are full of death, but they're also so full of life. There's the Nevrons, for example. There's the Gestrels. There's the Grandis. The universe they created here is just so interesting. I absolutely love the lore in this game. It makes everything feel so much deeper than what you see on the surface level. There's so much mystery here when you look around the world. You look in the distance, you'll see a huge tower that you can't gain access to yet. That turns out to be a pretty fun combat challenge later on in the game. The expedition logs that I mentioned earlier are a big part of the lore and add so much to the background story. A lot of them are emotional, a lot of them are funny, but they're always well voice acted. Many of them offer different perspectives on their mortality as their demise inches closer and closer. Just like the main story, these expedition logs are very emotional and extremely well written. And overall else, they will immerse you into a story that is already super immersive on its own. Sandfall did a really great job of having a lore explanation for nearly everything in the game. For example, we learn from expedition logs that the grapple points that help you traverse over gaps, as well as the climbing points that help you go up ledges, those were placed by previous expeditions. There's this code that expeditions live by, that their mission is to provide an easier journey, to pave the way for the expeditions to come. We climb and use these grapple points so often throughout the game that it's safe to say these guys did their job, and without them, you might not be able to get as far as you do in your expedition. To add on to the lore, as I said before, you come across these friendly Nevrons at times that have a quest for you. It'll have you asking, why are these guys friendly? Why are they asking me for help? All the other ones are trying to kill me. The main characters are so unaware of everything that's happening outside of Lumiere because they've never traveled outside of Lumiere. There's not a lot of information that comes back to Lumiere from the expeditions. It works perfectly to play from their point of view because you're also asking the same questions that they're asking. It's also all a mystery to you as well. For example, there's a point where Gustav will see a tipped over Ferris wheel, and his explanation for this Ferris wheel is that there was a previous expedition that used to use wheels to traverse over the terrain to get to the paintress quicker. Not only is that a cool lore tidbit, but it also tells you that these characters have no idea what a Ferris wheel is. They're so detached from the rest of the world and their history. And Ferris wheels are just so full of joy. They're a symbol of fun and happiness. It just goes to show how just depressed Lumiere is and how it's just a city of despair. Later on, you even find Expedition 50's journal, which confirms that they actually did try to build wheels to traverse the continent. It's like I said in the last section, it's things like these that remind me of gaming of old, where the developers try to make something cool just for the sake of making something cool instead of trying to meet a profit margin. It's like the trash can guy that you find in Lumiere. Absolutely something they did not need to add under any circumstances, but they did anyway because it's just hilarious. Again, if you know, you know. There's just so much mystery as you slowly uncover everything that makes the world what it is. If you follow the story path, you'll encounter the fading boy, the fading man, and the fading woman. Every time you speak to them, they talk in cryptic riddles almost that seemingly make no sense. But after you learn everything in the story, everything they say makes perfect sense. The concept of the game is about the curse with the paintress and the expeditions going out year by year, and that's all you're given at the beginning. But in reality, that's about 10%, maybe 15% of the actual story. It's so cool that as you progress, you learn so much more about what's really going on. You will find all sorts of individual levels that feel lived in, that feel like they have a past. It shows that even before the player arrived, there's a lot of history that happened before you ever showed up. As opposed to having empty, bare bones side levels that don't tie into the main story at all. Seriously, hats off to the writers, hats off to the level designers for making the side areas just as baked into the lore as the main story. However, the meat and the potatoes of the immersion come from the incredible cast of characters. Main characters, side characters, all characters. Character writing is my favorite form of writing in general, so it should come as no surprise that the characters in this game blew me away. The absolute most basic lesson you can learn from character writing is to just not make them cardboard cutout characters. And what I mean by that is to have very surface level characters. Characters that maybe only have one personality trait with very, very shallow history, motivations that don't make a ton of sense. For example, here's my cast of characters I'm writing for my new game. This one's the leader. This guy is the funny one. He's always just quipping all the time. Isn't he hilarious? Here's the badass one. He's always doing something badass. He's always aura farming all the time. He's just so cool. Expedition 33's characters are the opposite of this. They have so much personality and soul. They're almost all given backstories that we don't know about at first and are slowly revealed as we learn more about the characters. For example, there's Gustav. He is a natural leader. He holds everyone together like glue. He's always helping everyone push forward through their problems, even though he faces his own problems and he's essentially hopeless when it comes to this mission, but he hides it so he can help lift everyone else up. Despite seeing a lot of his friends die, he puts that all to the side so he can help people. Lune is very by the book and mission first because she's spent her entire life studying for this expedition and readying herself. We learn that she always hates taking detours from the main mission unless it's something where she can further her studies because she's always been studious ever since she was little. She's very brave and heroic, but you can see a lot of fear behind her eyes because she's so afraid of failure. Her parents worked very hard to research the paintress and find a way to accomplish the mission their entire lives as well. And you learn that Lune seeks validation and love from her parents, and her way of doing that is to further their studies. Ciel has a very tragic backstory which leaves her fearless. She's lost so much in her life, and it really built up her resilience. She really has nothing to lose, and she sees this expedition as a suicide mission. She's the opposite of Lune in that way, where she sees the mission as impossible, so she's just out here trying to live the last year of her life to the fullest and have fun. Ciel joins your party pretty early on in the game, and you come to learn that she's afraid of water and she can't swim. It's a pretty simple character trait, but through further gameplay, you'll come to learn why, and it's very sad. The voice actors, as well as the motion capture team, really helped bring these characters to life with their voice and their vocal inflections, as well as bringing a lot of personality just to their facial expressions. All the characters are so lovable and easy to root for, at least the ones in your main party. Not to mention, most of your party is made up of strong female characters. This game is an excellent example of how to write female characters without obvious pandering. Take notes, geriatrics in Hollywood. If you talk to them while you're in camp, which I highly recommend you do by the way, you will learn so much more about the characters. You'll come to learn a lot about their past. These are people that had jobs and loves and passions and a life before they were thrown into an expedition. You further appreciate who they are the more interactions you have with them. Throughout the game, you can always rest at camp where you can talk to these characters, as well as have Gustav write in his journal for his apprentices. In this journal, he writes down all the findings and discoveries that the expedition has been finding, that his apprentices will eventually use to better the world. Of course, you can listen to all your music records, you can upgrade your Lumina points and upgrade your weapons, but my favorite part about visiting camp is checking up with the party. After finishing a main story section, you can talk to one of your party members and they'll offer you their perspective on the events that unfolded. And oftentimes, you can even spend one-on-one time with each party member, which not only helps you unlock new gradient attacks, but also helps you understand these characters further. There is even 2 party members you can give a delectable wienering to if you so choose. It's amazing seeing all these characters interact and develop together, and their development feels natural because they literally are going through hell together. Now, we obviously can't talk about writing without talking about the story. Now, I'll get into spoiler territory in a little bit, but first I want to talk about what this story achieves. The game was written by Guillaume Broche and Jennifer Yen. Jennifer started out by auditioning to be a voice actor for this game, but Sandfall thought her skills would be used much more effectively writing the script. And thank God that's what happened, because Jennifer, you are such a talented writer. This script is amazing. This is one of the best scripts I've ever seen in any form of media. To my very limited knowledge, she hasn't released any other work in terms of writing. It's crazy to me that, in my opinion, we got one of the greatest stories ever written in fiction and one of the greatest soundtracks ever put to a video game in the same project from 2 people where it was their first attempt at doing so. I can't stress enough how the stars all just aligned perfectly for this project. This type of thing just doesn't happen. This story does what all great stories do. It grips you by the balls and it does not let go at any point. It's both engaging and thought-provoking. It gets across a message without the use of filler. The dialogue exists to develop the characters, to build the world, and to push the plot forward, and doesn't waste any of your time with any unnecessary bloat. When it comes to writing, I absolutely love when every piece of dialogue, every visual you see, every character moment, every event that happens during the plot happens for a reason, when there's just 0 wasted time. This game does just that. I love when there's tons of foreshadowing, when there's tons of moments that happen early on that all pay off later. There's no loose ends in the story here. Everything has a reason to exist. Everything pays off in a satisfying way. I love when that happens. In tense situations, there isn't any cheap MCU humor thrown in to ruin the tension. It all stays serious when it needs to. Yet, in the lighthearted moments in the game, it can be genuinely hilarious. The game does such a good job at balancing the comedic moments and contrasting them with the depressing moments. The Gestrels offer genuinely funny interactions. One of my favorite is when you encounter this Gestrel and he gives you a math problem. He asks you, within the current monolith year of 33, how old would a 2-year-old be when they eventually gommage? I'm sure if you've done this, you can relate, where you sit there and you do the mental math for 30 seconds of, okay, when they're 3 years old, it'll be year 32. When they're 4 years old, it'll be year 31. Just for this little bastard to have the nerve to straight up tell you, no, I actually don't know how to do math at all. I'm sure whatever answer you said is correct. Here's your reward. How about the time that the party needs to enter Eskie's cave, but there's a guard standing in the doorway that requires a password? You learn that you can find the password in the Gestural Village, so you spend hours to get there, learn that the password is, get out of my way, and you have to say it as loud as you can at the guard. Just for Gustav to yell, get out of my way, as loud as he can at the guard, for the guard to go, what the hell's the matter with you? I don't know any password, why are you being so mean to me? Just for Gustav to then, being the kind soul that he is, profusely apologize to this Gestural trying to repair the relationship. It had me actually cackling. Then there was this absolute menace in the Gestural Village that offered to give me a legendary weapon that shot lasers and could defeat any enemy I came across for the small fee of just a little chroma. So naturally, with an offer like that, I pay the man. And then he gives me a stick, tells me that Gestural kids play with these sticks and pretend fights all the time, then basically tells me to go get fucked because there's no refunds. Screw it, let's dance. Here's a breakdancing Gestural because why not? I could go on and on about all these light-hearted interactions that made me smile throughout my playthrough. But trust me, this game is an absolute roller coaster of emotions. There are some heavy moments that really just grab your heart and squeeze. In my experience, most video game humor doesn't have that effective timing to actually get a reaction out of you. And the developers of this game clearly have their foot in the door when it comes to internet meme culture as well. Here is your classic everything's fine meme. There's also moments where Eskie is running throughout the overworld and he'll yell, I am Speed! Throwback to Lightning McQueen. The memeology here is really fun, versus a, hey there fellow kids, type of humor from an out-of-touch board of directors. The game gives you the premise to go off of, that's it, and then it just throws you in. They only use dialogue in this game when they need to. They really capitalize on the show, don't tell type of storytelling, which I think is a very basic fundamental rule when it comes to storytelling. The game's pacing is absolutely phenomenal. It gives you just little bits and pieces of story here or there to keep you motivated to learn more, to keep you pushing forward, to keep you intrigued. But not enough information to completely tip its hand. It keeps you guessing. I love how this game provides you with information, because it seems like whenever you think you have everything figured out, they drop another bombshell on you and suddenly you know nothing again. There are several moments in this game with plot twists where it really subverts the expectations of the audience, and not in a terrible Last Jedi kind of way. I'm talking about subverting expectations where the character motivations actually make sense, not subverting expectations with some weird change just for the sake of making a weird change. You can use many words to describe the story of this game, but one word you cannot use is predictable, because it is a very unpredictable roller coaster ride, and I love every minute of it. Alright, we've reached it. It's spoiler time. You've seen these disclaimers before. If you want to skip the spoiler section and head right to this timestamp, you'll see my closing thoughts on the game as well as the score that I'm going to give the game, as if there's any surprise to what that's going to be. And I'm well aware that there are some cavemen out there that ignore these disclaimers and watch anyway, but seriously, if you have any inkling of desire to play this game, just leave. This is such a memorable and immersive experience. I refuse to ruin this game for anybody. Walter never takes Jesse go-karting. Not even once. I'm sorry, we're in spoiler talk now. This is your own fault at this point. Oh my god, this game hurts you. In the first 30 minutes, you see the citizens of Lumiere say goodbye to their loved ones as they all fade into nothingness. From the point of view of Gustav, he spends the gommage with his ex-girlfriend, who is 34 and is about to gommage. It is very clear that they were perfect for each other, and the only reason that they left each other is because they couldn't agree on having a child. Sophie didn't want to bring a child into this life where it would suffer and have a short life, but Gustav wanted to give it a shot. which is eventually what led to Gustav adopting Mael, who is an orphan that lost her parents because her parents were only a couple years from gomaging and they had a little slip up. Mael then bounced around from family to family until Gustav took her in because he wanted a child to look after. Anyway, back to it. Sophie and Gustav talk of regrets, talk about their feelings, and then, just like that, the paintress wakes and Sophie fades away. I actually cried like a bitch to this scene. I'm not kidding. Just within the first half hour of this game, you get attached to these characters because they feel so real. They are so lifelike. The first 30 minutes up to this point, we knew Sophie was going to fade away. We knew the paintress was going to wake up and Thanos snap. Yet we still feel the impact of it when it happens. It's so heavy. We see it coming from a mile away, yet when it happens, we still carry so much remorse for Gustav. This is where most people, including myself, got hooked into this narrative, and it does not let go. I was along for the ride. We're still in the prologue and I'm already crying. Later that night, a lot of the expeditioners have a sort of celebration for the lives of the people that were lost before they set sail. They drink, they party, they're merry, but Gustav is not having any of it. He is depressed. The next morning, they set sail on Expedition 33. Their ship sails into the unknown and their ship lands on an unknown beach. Upon stepping foot on this beach, the first thing they find is an old man who approaches them. An old man, past the age of 33. He's probably in his 60s. The expedition approaches this man, and then he proceeds to slaughter almost every single person in the expedition. This gives us a sense of hopelessness. I mean, the continent is so dangerous, the first person we encounter has our expedition down to single digits already. If this old man is this powerful, what else is waiting for us on this entire journey? We are still from the point of view of Gustav, and in this chaos, all the expeditioners that survive all scatter. Gustav wakes up in Spring Meadows, which is a beautiful looking place, but you can't even think about that because in the back of your mind, you're constantly thinking about the fact that the old man is still out there and he could run up on you at any second. You ask yourself, why is this old man doing this? How did he survive the Gomage anyway? The audience can connect with Gustav because we're in the same boat that he is. We have no idea what's going on, and now we're just all alone. Gustav is feeling absolutely hopeless. He just watched the love of his life fade into nothingness. Then he sails out and watches his entire team get murdered. You'd feel hopeless too. Going a little further into Spring Meadows, you come across a cave where Gustav sees piles and piles of expeditioner bodies. The dread is really settling in for him. And with everything that he has seen up to this point, all the experiences we've seen through Gustav's eyes, he puts a gun to his head. This game is incredibly dark. Keep in mind, this is still only maybe an hour into the game. 1 hour in, and this cheeky fella is ready to end it all. He puts the gun up to his head, and then out pops Lune. Lune tells Gustav that if you pull that trigger, you're killing us both. It has been Lune's life goal to get rid of this paintress curse, and the more people that she loses, the less of a chance she has to kill the paintress. Lune gives the best possible pep talk you could give to someone that's about to blow their head off after they watch their whole team die, and then they keep moving. If everyone gets scattered, the protocol is to meet beneath the blue tree, so they start heading that way. They fight their way through their first set of Neverons and eventually make it beneath the blue tree, where no expeditioners are found, but there is a note. The note essentially reads that if you wish to find Mael, you can find her in a hut somewhere within the coral reefs. Lune, of course, wants to follow protocol and wait beneath the tree for 3 days until any expeditioners show up. But Gustav wants to save his sister, obviously. He does not care if this note leads to a trap, anything to get Mael. It is unknown who wrote this note. It couldn't have been an expeditioner because if it was, they would have signed their name. That's protocol. And either way, Gustav starts heading that way, and before he leaves, he delivers one of the coldest lines I've ever heard anyone say. He looks over at Lune and says, "It's also protocol to stick together, and I'm leaving, so which protocol are you going to break?" Not only does this show us that Gustav obviously deeply cares for his sister, but it also shows us that he has aura. The note eventually leads you to Flying Waters, which is your next level. I spoke on the beauty of this area earlier. It looks like you're walking on the ocean floor. There's coral reefs, there's bubbles coming up, there's all sorts of sea creatures flying around. It looks like they're swimming. The music here also matches the vibe of feeling underwater, which I can't even describe what that sounds like, but the music matches the area extremely well. You eventually find the hut that Mael is supposedly inside, and there's a door that almost acts as a portal that brings you somewhere else. It brings you to a place called the Manor, which is a very mysterious place with all sorts of locked doors, but one of them is open, and inside you can find Mael. Mael has no idea how she even ended up in the manor. All she knows is that she's been waiting here and someone named the curator has been helping her. Yes, absolutely nothing suspicious going on with this guy. He waits for you at camp to upgrade your Lumina points and upgrade your weapons, and I'm sure that's all he exists for. I'm sure there's no significance to his character at all. Once we go back out into the flying waters, we meet Noko, our first Gestrel. Noko is this little Gestrel that tries to pick a fight with you even though he's the size of a fire hydrant. From Noko, you learn about the Gestrel race. You learn that they love fighting. You learn that a lot of them work as the merchants on the continent. Apparently, Noko and Mael already have built some sort of relationship, so Mael talks Noko down and convinces him that Gustav and Lune are his friends. Noko reveals that there is a massive sea between this area and the Paintress, and you're not going to be able to face her unless you have a way to transport across the water. Noko reveals that the Gestrel leader, named Golgra, might have a solution, so the expedition starts heading for the Gestrel village. The Gestrel village is located within the ancient sanctuary. Once the expedition enters the ancient sanctuary, all the Gestrels within think that they're intruders. So naturally, you have to fight your way through waves of Gestrels until you eventually reach the village. The expedition then meets Golgra, and Golgra tells them that she does have a way across the sea. It requires them to meet the fabled Esquier. Esquier is a very powerful creature, and Golgra also warns the expedition that he's also very goofy. He might accidentally eat one of them. There is also a Gestrel guarding the entrance to Esquier's nest, and he will not let you in without a password. And of course, Golgra has that password. Golgra needs proof that the expedition is strong enough to handle Esquier. She will not give them the password until they enter the Gestrel tournament. So, to prove their strength, the expeditioners join the tournament and they fight a couple Gestrels. Some of these absolute chads being Dominique Big Feet and Bertrand Big Hands. However, the final battle in the tournament is where you'll face off against your fourth party member, Ciel. After the incident on the beach, Ciel found herself here and made herself the champion of the arena. Ciel is the fun-loving and carefree party member on the expedition. She sees killing the Paintress as a suicide mission and just wanted to find a way to enjoy the last year of her life. I love that you find her here. It really fits her character well, because where else would you go to search for a rush? After the fight in the arena, she tags along on the expedition, becomes your fourth party member, and then Golgra gives you the password to enter Esquier's nest. And just like everyone else that played the game, I too tried to battle Golgra before I left, and I too got beaten to a bloody pulp. The party eventually enters Esquier's nest, where they of course find Esquier, a big, fat, lovable tub of fun that I would gladly own a plushie of. Esquier is everybody's favorite character, and he acts as the party's main source of transportation. However, he's extremely lazy, and he will not transport the party around unless he finds Esquier his rocks. You eventually learn that somehow Esquier knows Ciel from something that happened in the past, which is revealed much later and is very depressing. As I said before, Esquier is a lazy ass and he needs his rocks. And each rock that the party finds will help him unlock a new form of transportation. The first rock that Esquier needs will help the party cross water. The person that has this first rock is none other than Esquier's next door neighbor, Francois. The expedition heads over to Francois's cave, and they discover that Francois is just this big dickhead, so they have no issue taking the rock back from him. It is revealed that Francois doesn't even have the rock that helps Esquier swim. He says that he left it in a location called the Stonewave Cliffs, so naturally, the party needs to go grab that rock. Stonewave Cliffs is the next level. Stonewave Cliffs is personally one of my favorite levels in the entire game. The atmosphere is super heavy. There's a sense of danger here that we as an audience haven't felt since the beach with the old man. The enemies here are stronger than before. The music gets super dreary and melancholic. The color palette is just washed out and gray as the rain downpours on you. This all feels intentional to me, because one of the darkest parts in the entire plot happens here. This area really feels like a turning point in the game. Now you are really playing the game. The enemies, the combat is much tougher than anything before. This is where the story really begins, in my opinion. The vibes here are absolutely immaculate. The party eventually makes it through the area where they find Eskier's rock that allows him to swim, but at a price. Waiting for them on the cliff next to the rock is the Lampmaster boss fight. Up to this point, this is the toughest battle in the game by far, and it even has a second phase to its boss fight. But the expedition eventually pulls through. Esquier takes his rock, and he waits for the expedition on the cliff below to start swimming. Lune heads down. Ciel is hesitant because she's scared to swim, but she jumps down. But to celebrate the victory over the Lampmaster, Gustav and Mael have a bonding moment where they skip rocks across the sea before they jump down. Skipping rocks has always been Gustav and Mael's thing. It's how they've bonded. It's a very simple character dynamic between them. As Gustav is looking for a rock to skip, here comes the old man. You can hear his cane hitting the ground as he starts walking towards them. And I had that Interstellar meme moment where I was yelling at my TV going, Gustav, just jump down, screw the rock, dude, just go, get on Esquier. The old man doesn't need any mustache-twirling, cheesy dialogue as he starts walking towards them. He is a force. His presence is felt. He's menacing. And before you know it, the old man shoots some sort of laser through Gustav's chest. Our main character in the game just got the Ned Stark treatment. And if this moment didn't hook you, you are not human. This story takes bold steps that you wouldn't even dare see from a Western media company making a movie or a video game. This game is not trying to follow the generic color by numbers scheme that we've seen in storytelling time and time and time again. It's not afraid to twist things to tell their story effectively, which it very much does here. Gustav really was the heart and soul of the team. It broke me to watch the love of his life fade away and then the next day his entire team die. But despite this, having the darkness within him, the depression of seeing everyone around him die, he pushed through. He was the optimistic figure there to lift up all of his teammates when they needed it. He put his burdens aside to help the people around him. He really is a natural born leader and a fantastic person, and that is why it's so crushing to lose him in this moment. On another note, the developers inflated Gustav's skill tree to look bigger than it actually is. Many of his skills are locked, possibly behind a plot point later in the game. At least that's what I believe. But no, this exists to sway you into thinking that he lives longer than he does. It's a pretty elite level troll from the developers, and it's a fantastic way to avoid the spoiler that his death is coming. It makes sense to me now that he had the overcharge skill as his character mechanic because it is the most simple one. It acts as a tutorial character mechanic, and now you are familiar enough with the combat in this game up to this point where you can use the more complicated character mechanics. Anyway, back on topic. The old man is revealed to be Renoir, and Renoir walks up to Mael after killing Gustav in an attempt to kill her too. But before Renoir's blade can meet Mael, a mystery man swoops in and intercepts Renoir's blade and saves Mael. This is Verso. Verso informs Mael that it is safe and she is free to join her friends, and Verso will take care of Renoir. Renoir is a man that decimated an entire expedition with very little effort. That just goes to show how powerful Verso potentially could be, because Verso makes him walk away. Expedition 33 escapes and eventually heads back to camp, where Verso meets them, where he provides a lot of exposition. Verso reveals that he and Renoir were part of Expedition Zero, which happened 67 years ago, which would mean, for some reason, Verso didn't go Maj either. Expedition Zero's purpose was actually to help find everybody after they were all lost after the fracture. It had nothing to do with the Paintress. Verso mentions that for some reason, not only did they not go Maj, but they also stopped aging. Verso is much older than he looks. Verso reveals that Renoir does what he does because he sees his immortality as a gift from the Paintress, and Verso feels the opposite way. He's buried too many of his loved ones. He's ready to move on, and that's why he chooses to assist Expedition 33. As an audience, it's already clear to us that Verso knows his way around the continent. He's been living here for a while, and that he's obviously a skilled fighter if he's able to stand up to Renoir. Expedition 33 might not trust him yet, but they're happy to have him along. The story tells you all this without having to actually tell you. That's effective storytelling. Verso is mysterious, and there's obviously a lot to him that we don't know yet. The interests are aligned between the two parties. so he becomes our 5th party member, and that's the conclusion to Act 1. We're going to start up Act 2 here with a random longer haircut on me and maybe slightly different camera angle just for the memes. Okay, let's go, Act 2. Act 2 begins with Verso making a plan with the rest of the expedition to kill the Paintress. In order to kill the Paintress, according to Verso, they must destroy her heart, and her heart is located in a place called Old Lumiere. In order to reach Old Lumiere, they need to pass through an area called the Forgotten Battlefield, which is also where they hold Gustav's funeral. Now, I don't want to linger on every single area of this game for too long, but we need to go in depth here on the Forgotten Battlefield. I mentioned this place earlier before, and it is one of my favorite areas in the game. The vibes here are absolutely bananas. It houses one of my favorite bosses in the entire game, and it has some of the best battle music in the game in my opinion. I touched on this place a little earlier. It's the battlefield where there are mountains of dead bodies of expeditioners. You can feel the history as you walk through this place. When the expedition enters the area, Lune asks who killed all these expeditioners, and Verso says they were mainly killed by one Nevron. But I haven't seen that Nevron in many years, so we're probably safe. Not obvious foreshadowing or anything. No, I'm sure you're fine. When approaching Gustav's final resting place, the party crosses over this bridge, and the fabled Nevron of the past crashes into this bridge and causes the expedition to fall down a steep cliff. The party crashes down into a pool of blood from dead expeditioners. Mael gets injured, and then Mael has a moment with Lune where Lune heals her. Meanwhile, Verso has one of his many aura farming moments staring down the duelist. I really had a moment with this boss fight. This boss fight is where I knew this was turning into my favorite game of all time. His battle music is one of my favorite songs in the entire game, if not my favorite song. Not to be cringe and keep bringing up Souls, but this boss kind of acts as the Ornstein and Smo of this game, maybe the Pontiff Sullivan, if you will. And not just because of his 2 different colored swords, but because the difficulty here spikes tremendously, and it's a test to see if you can handle the rest of the game. The moveset here gets so much more complicated. He has several combos that mixes in jump attacks and gradient counters within normal attacks. His moveset is more complex than anything you've seen up to this point, and he even has much longer combos where he's hitting you 7, 8, maybe 9 times versus the other enemies that maybe would hit you 3 or 4 times max. Just for you to whittle his health all the way down to reveal a cutscene, he pulls out his other sword and boom, second phase. I absolutely love this fight. It's not my favorite boss fight in this game mechanically, but it is one of my favorite fights due to the vibe, the music, the ramped up difficulty up to this point, just its placement in the story kind of as a milestone fight. It's very much a welcome to Act 2 kick in the balls, and it really serves as a special chapter in an already stellar game, and his presentation is unreal. Add on the cutscene at the very end of the fight where you finally take him down. I love these end of boss cutscenes. The party all works together to take him down, and it's cutscenes like this why the word cinema was invented. The cutscene ends with booms coming in to let you know that you won the fight and you get your XP, and it's moments like these that give me chills, where my hair on my arms stand up. Before leaving the area, the party finds a grove where they bury Gustav. Mael, CL, and Lune all have touching moments where they talk to him before they leave. Again, if you watched this cutscene and you felt nothing, you are a husk. After this, the expedition leaves the Forgotten Battlefield and they start heading towards Old Lumiere. But first, Verso wants to make a quick pit stop and check on an old friend. The expedition starts heading up the mountain to find Minoko Station, where they, of course, find Minoko, our 5th and final party member. They give Minoko so much personality in this game. He is by far the funniest party member that you get. He and Verso had a falling out in the past at some point, and when Verso tries to recruit him to go to Old Lumiere, he's out. He thinks it's a suicide mission. Although Minoko is a Gestrel, it doesn't take a lot of convincing from Verso when Verso lets him know there will be a lot of fighting on the journey. It is revealed that the Gestrel we met in the Flying Waters, our friend Noko, is actually the son of Minoko. And being the absolute Giga Chad parent that Minoko is, he has his son tag along to the most dangerous part in the game so far. We also find out that Minoko is the blue mage character in this game. He steals Nevron's feet for whatever reason, which causes him to turn into Nevrons. You just have to have Minoko in the party when you kill new Nevrons and he will gain their abilities, which that's how he unlocks skills versus the traditional skill tree. Anyway, now that the party has added Parent of the Year candidate Minoko to the party, they start heading towards Old Lumiere. Old Lumiere is revealed to be the original and much larger Lumiere, and the Lumiere that we've come to know and love is actually a small chunk of the real Lumiere that was thrown out into the sea during the fracture. The party eventually approaches Old Lumiere, and the atmosphere is absolutely terrifying. There are light weapons stuck in the ground everywhere. It's located inside of a crater. In the distance, you can see one of these light swords inside the head of a dead creature. It's a giant with buildings on its back. We will later come to know this creature as well as several others as Axons. When the party enters Old Lumiere, there's an accident which causes the party to split into two separate parties. This forces you to try new combinations of party members on the fly. If you've been only using 3 specific party members and building around that party the entire game, well, now you need to get good. Combat in Old Lumiere forces you to adapt, and it adds another layer of freshness to the combat. When reaching the end of Old Lumiere, you find the manor, the one that all these random doors have been bringing us to the entire game. It's here. This is apparently where the heart of the paintress resides, and inside we see a faceless woman with long white hair that almost resembles a female version of the curator. One of the 2 split parties in this area was Verso and Mael, but halfway through their quest, Verso just jumps ship on Mael and leaves her alone. So Mael approaches the manor, and Mael alone. It is Mael that stares down this mysterious woman, and out of nowhere, Verso runs up from behind Mael to warn her not to open the door for her. The woman inside the manor is joined by none other than the masked little girl Alicia that stands by her side, and of course, Renoir. If anyone in this entire game deserves to have their intestines ripped out by a fucking grizzly bear, it's this goober, and of course it's him that's guarding the heart of the paintress. Before this battle, Lune, Ciel, and Minoko join back up with Verso and Mael. And before the battle, Lune confronts Verso, letting him know that they found an old expedition journal of an expedition that used to travel with Verso. Lune reveals that inside this journal was the Empire Strikes Back, but at home, where apparently Renoir is Verso's father. Before Lune and the rest of the group reunite, Verso and Mael are standing there with Renoir. In this confrontation, Mael threatens Renoir, and Renoir looks to Verso and says, "You haven't told her the truth yet, have you, son?" This line implies that there is something special about Mael that the audience doesn't know yet, but it subverts your expectations and makes you think that the truth that Renoir is referring to is the fact that Renoir is Verso's father. This game is so good at keeping the secrets of the main plot right in front of your face without screaming it at you. Writers, take notes here. The writers are forcing you to keep your attention on a certain plot while they keep secrets in the background, but basically right in front of you. The journal that Lune found earlier also contains information about the Axons, which the giant dead thing we saw is one of. But we'll get more into that after this boss fight, because this boss fight is sick. If the Duelist didn't give you the spike in difficulty you wanted, Renoir here will. There's no surprise here. It's the toughest moveset in the game up to this point, and of course, the music hits. The vibes are great. The battle happens in front of the manor. About halfway through his health bar, he spawns these 2, I don't even know what they are, to his sides, and if you don't destroy those in enough time, he will fully heal. After the fight, Renoir unleashes one more blast before the battle concludes, which kills Noko, parent of the Millennium. Then suddenly time freezes, and the manor door opens, and only Mael can move, where she sees Alicia, the girl with the mask. Alicia invites Mael into the manor to show her a burning manor. What is this supposed to mean? Time is unfrozen, and Minoko discovers his dead son. I'm going to miss the little broomhead. He provides such a light-hearted layer to the depression, and we are never going to hear his banter anymore. Thanks a lot for ripping our heart outs again, Renoir. After this, the manor just vanishes and the party is left there alone, and then they head back to camp. When back at camp, Verso seems hopeless. He seems to think that the only way to pierce the barrier that surrounds the paintress and enter the monolith was to destroy the paintress's heart. If you're in the story spoiler section here, I mean, it's obvious this mysterious woman is the paintress, and it's never said outright, but I truly believe that the paintress's heart refers to her family, Alicia and Renoir. Also back at camp, we see Minoko place Noko inside one of these jars. Minoko reveals that Noko and all other dead Gestrels can be revived at a place called the Sacred River, but it's a bit of a detour, and Minoko says that they can do it after the expedition is over. However, it should be noted that when Gestrels do revive, they don't come back as the same Gestrel. It's the same body, but essentially a different soul inside, which means the Noko that comes back will not be the same Noko. Verso seems to be out of options, but for some reason Lune isn't. Inside the journal that she found that revealed Renoir is the father of Verso, it also mentions the Axons. One of these creatures was the giant dead one we saw in Old Lumiere, but it seems that more of them exist. Apparently, they have so much pure chroma inside them that it can be harvested and given to the Curator, and the Curator can forge a weapon that can pierce the barrier around the monolith. Verso knew about this, but he neglected to say anything because he believes it's a dead end. He thinks that the Axons are so incredibly powerful that it is just absolutely pointless to try. But at this point, it's literally the only option, and if they don't succeed in killing the Paintress, they're going to die anyway. Verso states that there are 3 remaining Axons, and they only need the hearts of 2 Axons. One of the Axons is on a mountain too high for them to reach, so it's off the table. One of the Axons has been weakened by a previous expedition, and the other Axon hasn't. And you are given the choice as a player to choose which Axon you'd like to tackle first. One of which is easier, and the other one is harder, so if you crave a challenge, you can go for the harder one first, and then take out the easier one later on. Or, if you just want to build up the difficulty naturally, you do the easier one first, obviously. Just for the sake of making the video flow nicely, I'm going to start with the weaker Axon, which is known as Visage. This Axon's name is a direct translation from French, meaning faces, and that is very apparent because if you look at the terrain here, it's full of faces. They're everywhere. I'll talk a lot more in depth on the Axons in the lore interpretation part of the video because they have a lot of lore attached to them and it's pointless to repeat everything twice. So for now, I'll just say the expedition eventually fights the Axon, which is made up of many different masks representing many different emotions. This is phase 1 of the fight, and after destroying the masks, phase 2 is revealed to be the Mask Keeper, which is the real Axon. After taking down the Mask Keeper, the expedition then harvests its chroma to give to the Curator to craft the weapon. But before leaving, Verso alone kneels down in front of the dead Axon and says, "This was Verso, wasn't it, Renoir?" Kind of a weird line, whatever that means. After this, if you chose to do it in this order, the party heads to Seren, the next Axon. Seren is daunting, mesmerizing, almost beautiful as she dances in the middle of this coliseum. Verso notes that the party should not look directly into her eyes or they'll be swept away in her grace. This basically means that Seren can charm humans and hold humans under her control. Don't fall for it, kings. Pussy is a powerful drug. Stay strong. I would say that this boss fight in particular is very cinematic. The presentation, again, is crazy. There's different camera angles that go on. There's a final act phase right at the end of the health bar that almost just seems like it's happening on a theater stage. And of course, the expedition takes her down, and now they have enough chroma to forge a weapon to pierce the barrier. They give it to the Curator, and Mael is personally handed this weapon by the Curator. And now the moment we've been waiting for since the game began. Mael takes her new weapon, pierces the barrier around the monolith, and the party enters the monolith to find the Paintress. Inside the monolith feels like a fever dream. You see a lot of locations that feel familiar. In fact, some of them are exactly the same. You see spring meadows, flying waters, even Lumiere. Every location, in fact, that you've been to in the game up to this point, you revisit, at least up to Minoko Station, which is an intentional choice and will make sense later. Near the top of the monolith, before you reach the Paintress, you find the poop smear that has been disrupting the expedition for far too long, Renoir. Renoir seems to have a superiority complex over Verso and tries to talk him out of killing the Paintress, but it seems like Verso's already made up his mind. Renoir doesn't want to lose his son. If the Paintress dies, then their entire family dies, and Renoir doesn't want to lose his son. Thank you for writing a good villain! Verso is tired and no longer wants to live on. Mael wants to get revenge on Renoir for killing Gustave, and of course the rest of the expedition would like to accomplish their mission, and Renoir stands in the way of that. To say this battle is epic is an absolute understatement. The music alone makes this fight amazing. The music begins in cutscene but transitions at the perfect point to enter battle, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's nothing I love more than watching people react to this one transition. It still gives me goosebumps. His moveset is the exact same from the last time the expedition fought him in Old Lumiere, but there are more attacks added this time. Much harder attacks, I will add. The presentation in this fight is absolutely amazing, and it feels like the climax of Act 2, even though there's still more to do after this fight. There is no Phase 2 to this fight, but there's almost a Phase 1.5, where once he reaches 50% health or lower, he summons this Void Lion type creature that comes out of the woodwork and heals him back up to full health. This lion will also attack you and serves to add even more moves to Renoir's moveset. He has so many different attacks in his kit now, and there's a lot of memorization you're going to have to learn. Through blood, sweat, and tears, you will eventually best Renoir. Then you will get an ending cutscene where Curator enters stage left. You mean the guy that's been upgrading the expedition's weapons at camp and stares at them all while they sleep? What are you doing here, man? The curator approaches Renoir, and Renoir pleads with the curator, saying, if you do this, you lose the last piece of your son, which is Verso. But I thought Renoir was the father of Verso. The curator then grabs Mael's hand, and Mael and the curator both touch Renoir and erase him. After this interaction, the expedition climbs to the top of the monolith where they meet the Paintress. What you've been working for your entire playthrough, what 67 years of different expeditions have been working towards. Tomorrow must come. So the expeditioners approach the Paintress, but the Paintress doesn't really seem ready to fight. In fact, she recognizes Verso. She questions if Verso is even real or how he's here after the fire, whatever that means. Then she asks if Verso is one of Renoir's creations to try and play a trick on her. But we just fought Renoir a second ago, and Renoir is her protector. Why would he be playing tricks? Verso then asks her to go home, which is when the Paintress really believes that Verso is some kind of trick. The real Verso wouldn't want something like this, when in reality, Verso just doesn't see eye to eye with the Paintress as he wishes to die. The Paintress cries out that Verso is not really her Verso and that Mael is not really her Alicia, to which Verso replies, Verso is dead. So what a bombshell, we find out that Verso is somehow dead and that Mael and Alicia are the same person? The battle begins, and as you'd expect, it's just as amazing as the last one. Her battle music is haunting, and her moveset is so interesting to me. Every one of her moves is so uniquely different, especially visually. I love her moves. As you'd probably also expect, this fight is extremely cinematic, more so than the Seren boss fight. I mean, just look at this. There's a cutscene between phases 1 and 2 where the Paintress summons her giant Paintress form that we could see everywhere we were in the world. This giant version of the Paintress rises up, and the expedition hops on Esquier and they begin to fly away, but they are stopped. Look at how amazing this shot is. The party on Esquier, the giant Paintress blocking our way with a hole in her torso where we can see the Eiffel Tower and the moon, and then the real Paintress rising up. The presentation in this game is peak. I mean, I want this as a screensaver, damn it. Phase 2 is even more intense. There are attacks that the giant Paintress will use on you, including this one where she rips reality apart. Just from a cinematic standpoint, this move is fucking awesome. I'm questioning how I'm even supposed to dodge this. I mean, this is the universe folding in on itself. This battle really is a movie, and when you whittle down her second health bar, it's revealed that she has a third phase. Like the first two weren't hard enough, I'm supposed to tackle a third phase? But this third phase is not like the first two. It feels very off. She's beaten into submission, cowering on the ground. During her turn, she doesn't attack you. She heals the expedition. She even protects Verso, where she adds shields to his health bar. But why? We just roundhouse kicked her into submission, and now she's switching up? The Paintress finally falls, the number on her monolith finally fades away, and then the expedition heads back to Lumiere. As they're flying back to Lumiere on the back of Esquier, the vibes are off. Monoko and Verso really aren't talking or not even really celebrating much, even though they just accomplished their mission. It's as if they know more than they're letting on. We as the audience can tell something isn't quite right, but what is it? They land back in Lumiere, and then the parade begins. Mael tries to give Gustav's journal back to the apprentices, but after learning of Gustav's demise, they're very cold to this idea. Although at least Esquier is getting down. Verso sits at the docks during the celebration and reads a letter that Alicia had given him prior. Alicia intended for Mael to have this letter, but Verso chooses not to give it to her because it reveals a big bombshell. Now, for real, if you are one of those insane people that are still watching and haven't played the game, click off. I told you a long time ago. It is revealed that all the people we've come to know on the expedition, in Lumiere, all the Nevrons that we've fought, all the ground that we have walked on from Lumiere all the way to the monolith, is actually inside a painting. This entire story is inside a canvas that was painted by a young boy named Verso. The real Verso in the real world tragically died in a fire, and this canvas is being kept alive by Aline, Verso's mother, aka the Paintress. The reason that Aline is so involved in this canvas is because she cannot get over the death of Verso, and this helps her grieve. By keeping the last part of his soul alive with the last thing that Verso ever had, his childhood canvas. So why is she erasing everybody? What's with the monolith and the number and the gommage? As it turns out, she isn't the one erasing anybody. She uses the number on her monolith as a warning because her power is waning and Renoir, the real Renoir, is getting the upper hand. See, he is trying to erase the canvas because he believes the only way that the family can move on from Verso's death is getting rid of the canvas and actually stepping away and moving on. So swell job on killing the Paintress, destroying the only thing holding Renoir back from gommaging everyone. When that master manipulator Verso finally gets done reading the letter, the actual gommage begins and everyone fades away. Now that Aline isn't in the way of Renoir, Renoir does what he wants. This story of two parents grieving is so heavy and it's so well done from a storytelling perspective. And I'll touch upon the controversial elements of it later, but from a storytelling perspective, this is such a well done twist. As the story goes, the reason that Verso died in a fire in the first place is because of the real-world Alicia, who got caught in a fire and Verso sacrificed himself to save her. That's why we see Alicia cover her burn marks on her face with a mask. Since the entire world takes place in a canvas, this implies everything that we have seen in this world has to have been painted. Aline, Renoir, and their three kids, Alicia, Clea, and Verso, everything inside this canvas has to have been painted by one of these five people. And the game gives you more than enough hints to piece it together yourself. Who painted what? I mean, we have the Nevrons, the Gestrals, the people of Lumiere, there's all the settings, and so on. Everything has an explanation, and digging through the lore will help you piece everything together as to why the world functions the way it does. Everything in the painting artistically represents something, and everything painted is intentional. I mean, it literally takes place in a painting. This is art. It is later revealed that Verso's family, aka the Desandre family, are world-renowned painters, meaning that everything that they paint into their canvases represents how they perceive the world around them, how they feel about the world that they live in, how they approach grieving their dead son. The main themes of this story are grief, mortality, how we approach death. As the Desandres have their own views on this, so do the people of Lumiere inside the canvas, and so does the player base, us as an audience. This game came out clearly as an inspiration from turn-based games of the 90s, which means that the core audience for this game is likely older, which means these themes really resonate with the audience. Feelings of grief and our own mortality is something that people in their 20s and 30s begin struggling with. I can relate to this. They made sure to include messages for people of that age as they age. It's beautifully done. Now that the Paintress is gone and unable to hold back Renoir's true power, Renoir unleashes the gommage, which takes everybody in the city of Lumiere, including our party. They should have parried it. After this, the real Alicia wakes in the real world in a flashback before the events of Expedition 33. We can tell that this is the real world because outside of her window we can see an unbroken Eiffel Tower. When we first put our eyes onto real Alicia, we realize that she looks exactly like Mael, but is missing an eye and has burn marks on her face like Alicia inside the canvas. Alicia then walks out of her bedroom to discover that she's in the manor, the same manor we've been seeing throughout our entire playthrough. Turns out, the manor is the real-life home of the Desandre family. Who would have guessed? Alicia eventually enters a room where she finds her parents next to Verso's canvas. They aren't moving, they aren't acknowledging the real world around them. It is as if they are spiritually connected to the canvas. As it turns out, they're actively painting inside this canvas when we see them. They are acting as the curator and the paintress respectively. Look at these two, they are absolutely locked the hell in. This is how locked in you should be. This effect over their eyes actually just means that they're painting. In fact, Alicia's older sister Clea comes into frame with these similar eyes, meaning that she was probably just painting before she ran into you. Clea refers to Alicia as a shadow, implying that they don't really even see her much anymore. The unfortunate reality is, Alicia doesn't believe she has a future in this world, because look at her, the fire left her deformed. Her family also neglects her, with a couple of her family members even blaming her for the death of Verso. Alicia does feel responsible for the death of Verso, so she asks Clea what she can do to help. Clea asks Alicia for help in eliminating the canvas. She wants Renoir back as soon as possible. Although she really doesn't care about repairing the family, she wants Renoir out of the canvas for her own means. See, Clea is trying to go after the people responsible for the fire that killed Verso, who are called the Writers. Clea wants Renoir's help to fight this battle, but from her point of view, Renoir's too distracted inside Verso's canvas. So, with Alicia desperate to help, she enters the canvas, trying to push her parents out. Alicia enters the canvas, she's consumed by Aline's chroma, and since this whole thing was a flashback, Alicia is reborn as Maëlle, with no memories of her outside world, and then lives 16 years inside the canvas until we get to the beginning of the game. And before you ask, yes, time does move differently inside the canvas. It wasn't literally 16 years. The problem is, Maëlle eventually falls in love with this canvas. She actually has a real life in here, a real family to look after her. From her point of view, she has more in this canvas than she does on the outside world. After Renoir's last gommage, Alicia re-enters the canvas as Maëlle and decides, no, I actually like it here. I'm going to fight to protect this place. This is a place where she can truly live her life, where she can actually spend time with her brother Verso, even if it is a fake painted version of Verso. He's still real. The family dynamic here is very nuanced, and at times it is really hard to decide who to side with in this family drama. Inside canvas time, we'll call it, Renoir worked for 67 years to stop Aline from drowning herself in this canvas, so you know Renoir's going to have a problem with Maëlle trying to do the same thing. Once back in the canvas, inside the city of Lumiere, Maëlle finds painted Verso sitting on a bench. She lets Verso know, even though now she has the memories of herself on the outside world, she still prefers to have the name Maëlle over Alicia. This, of course, represents the fact that Maëlle feels she has more of a life inside the canvas versus outside. This is her Jimmy McGill versus Saul Goodman moment, where having two different names coincide with two different life paths. While walking through Lumiere, they eventually come across the Curator, also known as the real-life Renoir. This tells us that the Curator was helping the expedition all along because Renoir was trying so hard to push Aline out of the canvas. That's why he wanted us to succeed on this mission to kill the Paintress. Maëlle tries to convince Renoir to leave the canvas alone, because it really is the last piece of Verso's soul. How could you possibly destroy it? She also lets Renoir know that she really has a life here. And of course, Renoir just went through this whole thing with Aline already. Renoir doesn't want the canvas to consume Maëlle just like it did with Aline. Renoir believes that the only way to move on with Verso's death is with breathing room, with letting Verso pass on. After their little disagreement, Renoir summons void creatures, which leads Verso and Maëlle to hop on Esquier and fly the hell out of there. Aberrations, which are similar to an enemy I'll describe later, show two creatures on each side of a void sword. Look at this thing, man. I love the enemy design in this game. The void representing the fact that Renoir would like to erase things in the canvas rather than create. They head back to camp, and Maëlle, with her new paintress powers, repaints Lune and Ciel. Maëlle explains the entire situation to them, which then Lune gets pissed at Verso for manipulating the party the entire game. Now that Maëlle is officially a paintress herself, they have the opportunity to push Renoir out of the canvas and bring life back to the canvas. That being said, Act 3 happens in one location and one location only. They head to Lumiere to confront Renoir. The expedition enters an unrecognizable Lumiere. It looks almost fantastical even, with all sorts of crazy colors clashing in the sky as if it's literal colors painting in the canvas. You see all sorts of Renoir's creatures flying throughout the sky during this. It's almost like you're in a Lumiere in a different dimension. It is a complete contrast to how we see Lumiere in the prologue. This is Verso's Lumiere before it got thrown into the sea. Now it's rebuilding. I would consider this Aline's Lumiere. But now we're in Renoir's Lumiere. Here's another theme of contrast. Lumiere was rebuilding, and now in Renoir's Lumiere, it is currently being erased. And this whole thing could possibly represent how messy family drama can really be. Maëlle uses her access to very limited chroma to paint her own expeditioners, the 32s. She sends the 32s into Lumiere like an army to take down all of Renoir's creations so the expedition can push forward to Renoir. This place is a war zone, and the entire location is just action-packed with the music keeping pace with you the whole time. In fact, it's the same song outside and inside of battle here. The music is uninterrupted when entering battle, which makes everything here just feel like one action-packed scene. Not to completely clown on the MCU again, but Act 3 here feels like a naturally built-up climax to the whole story, instead of it feeling shoehorned in just because they needed an action scene. The spectacle of this entire scene, as well as the pace, feels earned. After everything you've been through to get here, the tensions are finally breaking. This is a true climax. Pause. Through Lumiere, you fight many of Renoir's void creatures, including the creation enemy, which serves as a final test to see if you're ready to fight Renoir. Partway through Lumiere, you actually fight some enemies that you met on the Axon Island specifically, because these are Axon Island creatures, as opposed to Nevrons. As you'll come to know, Renoir created the Axon Islands, and all the enemies found on those islands were painted by Renoir, whereas the Nevrons specifically were painted by Clair. You even have to end up fighting some of the 32s themselves that end up becoming corrupted. Fighting these guys specifically was fun, because they mimic the same moveset as your expeditioners. I specifically remember fighting a Maëlle, a Lune, and a Gustave moveset when fighting these guys. This really tests you to see how well you know your own party's moves. I think of it as kind of a reverse Minoko situation, as he ends up using the same enemy moves that are used against you. This, again, provides so much freshness to the combat, even this late into the game. Once reaching Renoir, Renoir again tries to talk some sense into Maëlle. At one point, Renoir even shows the party what Aline looks like outside of the canvas as she's down on her knees coughing, almost as if she's dying, appearing depressed and sick every single day because she can't move on from Verso due to how addicted she is to the canvas. Renoir will do anything to make sure this doesn't happen to Maëlle, but Maëlle doesn't care. She has a life here. She wants to stay. She not only thinks it's cruel to erase everybody that's clearly alive and real inside the canvas, but she also doesn't want to get rid of the one last piece of Verso that the family has. This, of course, leads us to our final battle in the game, kind of, the Curator, aka Renoir, versus Expedition 33. The music here, of course, does not disappoint. Who would have thought that? This fight also rivals the Paintress fight in terms of how cinematic it is. He will continuously pelt you with void damage, trying to erase you from the canvas, and as you chip his health down, eventually he will summon the Axons. This is when it is revealed that Renoir was actually the painter of the Axons. Just like how the painted family, such as Alicia and Renoir inside the canvas, represent Aline's views on her own family, the Axons is actually how Renoir views his family. The Axons that show up are Visage, Sirene, the Reacher, and the Hauler, which represent Verso, Aline, Alicia, and Clair respectively. The Axons in this battle are here to support Renoir with buffs, shields, damaging the party, and even with healing. The same way he wishes his real family would support him in this cause. Once you get Renoir's health low enough, Sirene, who represents Aline, saves him and gives him all of his health back, implying that once upon a time, Aline once saved Renoir when he got lost in a canvas. The battle seems lost. That is until Mama Aline comes back into the canvas and repaints her kaiju self. This, of course, is the Paintress we've all come to know and love, and this kaiju Paintress attacks the Axons, which gives the expedition enough breathing room to finally take down Renoir. This battle is absolutely awesome. It screams climax to me, and it is just the perfect ending fight. After the battle, Renoir tries again to sweet-talk Maëlle into leaving the canvas. However, it is Maëlle that is the sweet talker, and she actually convinces Renoir, who has been trying to end this fight for 67 years, to let Maëlle stay. This does make a lot of sense, because upon doing a side area, you will actually learn that Renoir's favorite child is Alicia, and he has such a soft spot for her. Although Renoir knows that she is going to get consumed in the canvas, and this is probably just a trick, Renoir actually decides to leave the canvas to Maëlle. Well, game over, right? Well, as it turns out, Verso is not okay with the events that just unfolded. See, Painted Verso is a creation of Aline's, and Aline cursed him with the memories of real Verso. Verso remembers the fire, and he knows how badly the family on the outside of the canvas is suffering. Verso agrees with Renoir. He doesn't want to see his baby sister suffer and die inside this canvas and lose herself. This leads us to our actual final battle, where Verso jumps through a portal which leads him to an in-between dimension between the real world and the canvas. It is here where Verso finds the Fading Boy, the same Fading Boy that we have seen through our playthrough in almost every area. The Fading Boy ends up actually being the last shred of Verso's soul that still remains in the canvas, and in order to destroy the canvas, this soul must be erased. The Fading Boy represents the last part of Verso that lives on, so of course, Maëlle is not having this. The Fading Boy is seen as depressed, only painting to keep this canvas alive under the pressure of his family. This is not the fun getaway canvas that Verso made anymore. This is an unrecognizable, war-torn canvas. He does not wish to continue painting. The Fading Boy wants to rest just as bad as Painted Verso does. Clair, Aline, and Renoir change so much about Verso's canvas that how much of Verso is even left in this canvas? Maybe that's why he's fading in the first place. He has no desire to continue painting. He's just as tired as Painted Verso, and since Painted Verso is that, a painting, he cannot survive in this dimension for long. Painted Verso then attempts to erase Verso's soul, where Maëlle slashes her blade in between them. Expedition 33's story has many layers. It's an art piece. It tackles grieving and how people grieve differently. It tackles different parenting styles. On a deeper level, it's an artistic take on artistic expression as a whole. This is a story about a family of artists who have their own unique art styles and their own artistic vision. This could be Sandfall very subtly calling out AAA studios like Ubisoft. How clashing ideas on creating art fails to make something with focus and meaning. This also could be a reference to the war between the writers and the painters within this game's universe, possibly relating to different departments within a giant company that clash on ideas. I mean, we know this kind of thing happens. It should come as no surprise that the creator of this game came out and said that smaller studios are going to create better games. Expedition 33's story is rich with deeper meanings and complex themes, but it's also not so obtuse at portraying its messages that you'll feel the need to go look up a million YouTube explanation videos to understand what's going on. No art piece is complete without the nice bow tie that wraps everything up that is the conclusion. I want to dive deep into the ending of this game, but before I can, I want to talk about this game's title again. Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I've yapped long enough about Expedition 33, but what is Clair Obscur? Clair Obscur is a French term that translates roughly to light dark, which is a technique in painting. This technique involves using light and dark colors to clash and create contrast, adding depth, moodiness, and drama. Painting, contrast, moodiness, and drama. Those are 4 words that describe this game pretty well. We all know that this game can be very dramatic and moody, but there's more to it than that. There's a big emphasis on contrast. In the story, we see clair enemies that represent the light and obscure enemies that represent the dark, and there are even clair obscur enemies that look like both enemies stitched together. And these enemies contrast the aberration enemies that were painted by Renoir. I feel as though the Clair Obscur name is so important because of how many themes are in this game that directly contrast each other. One of the obvious examples being how Aline and Renoir approach parenting and how they grieve over Verso. Maybe I'm reading into this a bit much, but look at the paintress's weapon. She holds a paintbrush because she paints life, right? Well, look at Renoir's weapon. His paintbrush is a blade because he wants to take life. These are direct contrasts to each other. Maybe that's just how I interpret it, but at the end of the day, Aline creates and Renoir destroys. However, in both of their battles, they both do void damage to you because they are actively trying to erase you since you stand in their way. The fading boy once mentioned that light and dark must dance together, but that light must lead. Is that why we always see lamps leading us to our destination throughout the game? Hell, even look at CL's cards. She has a sun card and a moon card, which are obvious contrasts. There are a ton of Clair Obscur examples in this game if you look hard enough. Clair Obscur is kind of like yin and yang, where they are direct opposites of each other, but they can't exist without one another. One side of the yin and yang could be Aline, who approaches the canvas with love and care, but is clouded with depression and unable to let go. The other side being Renoir, whose approach is harsh, but he's doing it to save his family. Like yin and yang, one of these would not exist without the other existing. They play off of each other. Which side to you is Clair and which is obscure, which is light and which is dark depends on how you view the entire situation. Hell, I even think that the Clair and obscure enemies attach to each parent, with Clair being Aline and obscure being Renoir, because the Clair enemy applies shields and the obscure enemy applies rage. The Clair enemy, being Aline, applying shields to protect the canvas and everything in it, and Renoir representing the obscure enemy, giving rage to its allies, causing them to go twice in a row on their turn, because of his desire to destroy everything in the canvas. Maybe the developers of this game are trying to tell us that in order to find the light, we must fight through the darkness first. And if we spend too long dancing in the ignorant bliss that is the light, darkness will be all that's left in the end. Is that deep enough for you? Well, I felt like it needed an explanation, because there are actually two endings to this game, and I believe that the two endings are complete contrasts of each other. After Mael slashes her blade between the fading boy and Painted Verso stands up, apologizes to Mael, and takes his blade out as well. And this is where you're given the choice. Do you want to choose Mael's ending or Verso's ending? Do you want to save the canvas or destroy it? Mael, which is the name that Alicia gave herself inside the canvas because she believes that her real life takes place inside this canvas. This is where her happiness is. This is where she wishes to live. Her outside life represents a girl with no friends, no future, no Verso, and a family that is cold to her. Inside the canvas, Mael is a girl who feels alive, that can go on adventures with her friends and her brother. The canvas is her sanctuary. It's a place where she can continue Aline's work to keep Verso's soul alive. And most importantly, keeping her friends from ceasing to exist. Then there's Painted Verso, his soul enslaved by Aline and Mael, to keep painting a world he no longer wishes to be a part of. He wants to move on and rest in peace, but he feels as though that Mael and Aline will not allow him to. Painted Verso agrees with Renoir. He loves Mael and his mother, and he sees how this canvas is consuming them, and it's tearing apart the Desandre family. Verso no longer wants to exist to merely fight off the grief of his family. However, this choice will leave Mael as an outcast to her family and without the last piece of Verso's soul. This is Clair Obscur. Earlier in the game, Mael and Verso are having a conversation, where Mael mentions that she left Lumiere because she was living a life that she did not want, and on a repeat playthrough we can totally see that Verso relates to this. When choosing one of these endings, you have to swallow the fact that you are going to force one of these two characters to live a life that they do not want. The writing is unbeaten. The ending contrasts two of our main characters' viewpoints. Of course, it also contrasts Renoir and Aline. Aline sits atop the monolith, trapping Renoir beneath it, in order to keep him from erasing the canvas. However, Renoir is powerful, and he will not be held in his prison forever. The number on the monolith is a clock, to let the people of Lumiere know how much time they have left until Renoir erases them from the canvas. Every monolith year, as the paintress' power dwindles, Renoir is able to erase Aline's oldest creations. Aline does not wish to give up Verso's painting. It serves as a memento to remember him by. She does not want to throw away the last connection she has to her son. That is why we can see the paintress always sobbing. She sobs for Verso's death, yet she also sobs for the canvas itself and the people in it. It can also be seen that the paintress has a hole in her chest, possibly to represent that Verso's death ripped her heart out. Aline protecting this canvas comes at an obvious price. Aline becomes obsessed, unable to move on from Verso's death, because the canvas is a constant reminder of the worst day of their family's lives. Aline created the people of Lumiere and gave them free will and the ability to think for themselves. Due to this, the expeditioners completely misunderstand the gommage and think that Aline is causing it, and that is why Aline sends out painted Renoir to kill the expeditioners. Not because she wants them to die, she literally cries for them, but because if the expeditioners are successful in killing the paintress, the canvas disappears. At one point, it's revealed that Aline is a much more talented painter than Renoir is, but Clea is actively leeching the chroma from Aline, giving Renoir the upper hand. This also means that she doesn't have the chroma to paint new creations. That's why she can't simply replace the people of Lumiere. The whole free will thing is very important. This shows that the people inside the canvas are actually alive. This fact makes Verso's ending a little harder to choose because you are essentially committing genocide against thousands of people. Renoir is a man of family togetherness, and he wishes to tackle this problem with his family as a team, together. However, Aline's emotions get in the way, and then she creates distance between her and Renoir. Renoir simply wants to face the harsh realities of the fire and grow from it as a family. Renoir sees Aline and Maëlle clinging to a false reality. He sees the canvas as a disease that is infecting the ones he loves. However, his views come at a price as well. He comes off harsh. In trying to save Maëlle, he pushes her away. Renoir has watched Aline lose herself in the canvas, and he just doesn't want the same thing to happen to his daughter. From Renoir's point of view, the only way he can save his family is to destroy the canvas, although Renoir still is a man of respect. He recognizes that the people inside the canvas are very real. He does feel remorse for having to erase Alicia's friends. He feels empathy for Lune and Ciel. He acknowledges them as if they are alive and that they have feelings. He even apologizes to Painted Verso for the hardships that Renoir's family drama have caused him. Renoir is far from heartless. He realizes how addictive this canvas can be, which is a great message not to get too lost in anything or you'll lose yourself. Renoir knows what must be done, but he resents the fact that he needs to destroy an entire world to do so. Us as an audience are led the entire game to believe that the people within the canvas are real, and that is why it is so hard to let them go. I even teared up on a repeat playthrough when I watched Sophie Gommage, because even though she's a quote-unquote painting, she still felt real enough to me to choke me up. This isn't the fucking Sims, guys. You know the theory that we all could be living in a simulation. What if that ends up being true, and our creators just want to delete us and our loved ones? Would you be okay with that, just because we're technically fake? Look at how hard Painted Renoir fights year after year after year to keep his family alive. Yes, alive, because whether they're inside a canvas or not, they are living. We see how devastated at the fact of losing his family makes him. We see Verso and how desperate he is to end his own existence. How full of dread he is at the thought of living on. We are told that Lune has worked her entire life since she was 4 to strive for survival to kill the paintress. She wants to live. In my opinion, the Desandre family are just as real as the people within the canvas. We witness the people of Lumiere push to break the curse so they can stop grieving over their lost ones. We see the diverse views and complex politics of the people of Lumiere. And Gustave and Sophie's love was very real, and you're a monster if you don't believe that. Even Maëlle has lived 2 lives with 2 childhoods in 2 different worlds. Yet the canvas is real enough to her to choose it as her life. Can you blame Maëlle for wanting to stay inside the canvas? She is deformed, she can no longer speak, and deleting the canvas will take away the one place she can feel alive. However, this canvas is Verso's painting, and he feels responsible for having to fix his family's lives. Even if he isn't technically Verso, he still shares all of the real Verso's memories and stuck in the middle of this family drama. And after witnessing Renoir fold to Maëlle, he feels like he's the only one that can do what must be done. But consider he did lie and manipulate to the expedition to achieve his goals. Even though I would argue he's justified in this, because it will lead to a future that he believes is right. He kept leading on the expedition towards killing the paintress even though he knows it would get them killed. He is suffering, and this is the only way that he can rest. After all, Verso did try to be honest with an expedition once before, and it ended up with him getting betrayed and turned on, forced to kill someone that he loved. No wonder he wants to die so badly. Choosing Aline is also choosing Maëlle. It's also choosing life and death, whereas choosing Verso is also choosing Renoir, which is also choosing life and death. And at this point in the game will ask you, who do you choose? Do you save the Desandra family or save the expedition? Do you take the blue pill or the red pill? Is saving Verso's soul worth killing Mael's friends? Is providing a sanctuary for Mael worth enslaving Verso? Is the proper way to grieve to keep the last remnants of your lost ones alive, or to completely detach from that and move on? I love how complex this choice is. There is no correct answer. Without a doubt, these two parents love their kids, but the way they approach grief is very different from one another. The ending is actually asking you, the player, how you approach grief. It checks how attached you are to this canvas like Mael is. It asks you, how do you feel about Mael's life, and how do you feel about Verso's soul? It asks you who's right between Aline and Renoir. All of the characters here are so complex, yet flawed, making it very hard to choose a side. Both choices are bright, yet cruel. That's Clair Obscur. Either choice you make, you are ruining the life of one of these characters and essentially destroying the world that they inhabit. Choosing Verso also means that all of the work that 67 years worth of expeditions did to kill the Paintress is worth nothing. But at the same time, Mael is just a child. How is she supposed to know what is good for her yet? I've been seeing a lot of discourse online, people arguing about which ending is better morally, that one choice is the obvious choice and better than the other. It really is such a nuanced decision to make. I absolutely love it. Both choices are morally gray, and either thing you pick, you are sacrificing something. But at the same time, someone is going to greatly benefit from the ending you choose. From your point of view, which ending is correct? And if you're like me and think that neither are, which one is less harmful? I have also seen a lot of discourse online about a lot of people hating the direction that Act 3 goes in as a whole. A lot of people feel as if the big reveal that everything's happening inside a canvas feels like a rug pull, but I simply don't agree. Overall, I feel like this twist gives everything we've seen in the game up to this point a lot more meaning. If the developers decided to reveal this twist too early, we would have never grown attached to the people of the expedition. We would have never soaked in how real the world feels. The writers of this game wanted us to feel for Mael. They wanted us to get attached to these characters like she did, to make the ending harder to choose. There's all sorts of cryptic dialogue at first, when after you learn the twist, all the cryptic dialogue starts to make sense. Like when taking down Visage, when Verso says, "This was Verso, wasn't it, Renoir?" Giving us a direct clue that this is a creation and possibly a clone of Verso. It lets us as the audience know that there is much more going on behind the scenes than we know. A rug pull would mean that we had no prior clues and it just kind of happened out of the blue. The game gives us enough hints that something deeper is going on, but not revealing anything until it needs to. It's as if the twist is hidden in plain sight the entire time. In fact, I know the game gives us enough clues throughout the game because a close friend of mine played the game after I did, and he perfectly predicted that everything going on in the game is happening inside a painting. I did not spoil anything for him. He told me a lot of his theories, and a lot of them were wrong, but he nailed a lot of things, including this twist. I believe this twist is hard to predict, but he actually did it. I distinctly remember him saying that Verso is the main character of this painting when he was making his predictions, and I was blown away that he got that. He listed colors of luminas, tints, recoats, and other items as references to a painting, as well as the fact that the world looks like an art piece in and of itself, not to mention all the references to painting throughout the game, there are loads of them, as well as the gestrels having paintbrush bristles on the top of their head. You do use color of lumina and recoats on your characters, who are paintings, implying that you are actively painting them. More often than not, you pick up chroma and color of lumina off expedition or corpses, implying that the color has left their bodies. I am not at all saying the game is predictable, but if you are genuinely upset, feeling that Act 3 is a rug pull, I genuinely think you just didn't pay enough attention, I'm sorry to say. No matter which choice you make, the ending is going to be hard-hitting. But after all this, after you do make your choice, what happens next? If you choose Verso's ending, you battle Mael. I would also like to point out here that in this battle, both characters are weak to fire, considering they were both involved in the fire in the lore, which is just such a cool touch from a lore perspective, and absolutely diabolical at the same time. Upon beating Mael, Mael falls into Verso's arms. She cries and says, "Don't do this. Don't leave me again. I remember upon my first playthrough, because I did end up choosing Verso's ending. Personally, for me, I feel it is the better ending. Anyway, I heard her say those words, and then my eyes started like watering. I wasn't like crying or anything, but I remember my allergies just really started to hit me when that happened, like a ball peen hammer. Anyway, Verso comforts her and lets her know that she will be okay, that she's a talented painter and she can live in all sorts of different canvases. Verso assures her that she will find purpose in the real world. And then Mael fades. Ciel says one final goodbye to Verso before she fades as well. Ciel feels she has lived her life to the fullest, and she really has nothing left to lose since she's lost so much already. Ciel is ready to go, as Verso is. But in Clair Obscur fashion, on the other side of the coin, here's Lune. Lune looks upon Verso angrily. She is upset that her entire life's work ended up meaning nothing, and she's going to die anyway because of the choices Verso made. I love how beautifully written these characters are. There's never one point in the game where the characters betray who they really are. After this, Minoko, Eskie, and Verso share one more hug where Verso tells them that he's really going to miss them. Then, Minoko and Eskie fade away. I don't know who's cutting onions in my apartment right now, but they should really stop. Verso then grabs the fading boy's hand and they walk into the distance, implying that this is their final resting place as well. The game cuts to the outside world, where we see Aline and Renoir, Alicia, and Clea finally all together mourning Verso at his grave. Eventually, Clea, Aline, and Renoir all leave as Alicia stays there at the grave for a few more minutes. She sees a vision of all of her friends from the canvas waving goodbye one last time before they all disappear. The camera shots here really emphasize how alone she is, with not only her friends from the canvas fading away, but all of her family members walking away from her too, leaving just her there in front of Verso's grave. When choosing Mael's ending, you fight as Mael, Mael bests Verso, and then Verso falls into Mael's arms. Verso begins begging Mael to let him die. He repeats on and on about how badly he does not want this life. However, Mael doesn't only want to live in this canvas, she wants to live with Verso. This is her brother. She is not going to let him pass on. But now he won't be allowed to. Because after Verso fades from Mael's arms, we cut back to a reinvigorated Lumiere. Mael enters the opera house to watch Verso play piano, something that Verso promised would happen after they beat the paintress. The game emphasizes that you chose to save the canvas, and everyone that is dead is now back. Sitting in the theater, we see Ciel sitting next to Pierre, who is her husband that died long ago, but Mael repainted. Lune is there. Even Gustav and Sophie start walking down one of the aisles and sit next to Mael. Our boy is back. She now has her world and all of her friends back, and now she can be happy. And then, the performance begins. Everything we've seen up to this point, Lumiere was in color, but on stage, we only see black and white to represent how dreary of a life this is for Verso. Verso sits at his piano to play a performance for the audience, but then he hesitates, almost as if he's refusing to play. You can really see the pain in his eyes. He does not want to be Mael's puppet. We cut back to Mael, who has the painter's eyes that we saw Clea have earlier in the epilogue. This implies that she is controlling Verso, because after this, Verso begins to play piano, and then we cut to black. Upon first glance, it might seem like Verso's ending is the good ending and less tragic, but with proper context, they are both equally dark. Both of these endings are tragic. While something is gained, something is equally lost, and that's Clair Obscur. This is a complex story with a complex ending, but that's not all. It also exists inside a complex world, because it has so much rich history and lore. Call me somebody that just finished Eskie's relationship quest, because it's time to go on a deep dive. As I said before, I'm not an expert on the lore of this game, it's just what I gathered from playing the game. Don't take everything I say here to heart. Everything here is up for interpretation, and that's by design, because that is simply what good art is. After several playthroughs of just diving headfirst into this world and immersing myself in it, listening to the dialogue, reading the journals, talking to my friends, I think I have a decent grasp on what's going on here. I'm not going to talk about everything, but I specifically want to dive into the Desandre family's paintings, all of the paintings, and by that I mean literally everything inside the canvas. We know that everything here had to have been painted by Verso before his death, or Aline, Renoir, Clea, or Alicia aka Mael. I think it is appropriate to begin with Verso first, because after all, he is the originator of the canvas. Since he created it as a child, he made this place as a fun getaway for him, like a playground. Somewhere where his imagination could run wild, a place where he could play with his siblings. Throughout the game, we can see Ferris wheels and merry-go-rounds. It is stated that Verso used to ski in the Frozen Hearts area. The gestural beaches existed for Verso and his friends to go soak up the sun. There used to be joy and life here before the fracture and the Nevrons destroyed everything. The gestrals are almost childlike in a way. Well, that's because Verso painted them to be his silly little friends. There were trains traveling through the world with a train station sitting atop the mountain. It should be stated that almost everything inside the canvas is inspired by something in the real world. For example, we see all sorts of artwork across the Descendre Manor, including paintings of Axons and Nevrons, and even some party members if you look close enough. We can piece together that Verso created the gestrals and the train station inside the canvas because he has a train set and gestral toys in his room. You find instruments like Verso's piano and Clea's harp. You even find a guitar that resembles the one Lune plays inside the canvas. It is clear that Verso also painted Esquier and Minoko because they can even be found in the manor. Esquier is Verso's favorite plushie. You can find it on his bed in the manor, and you can see Mael holding it in Verso's ending. Minoko is the family dog. You can see Minoko and another dog named Noko cuddling with each other in front of the fireplace during the epilogue. When exploring the manor, you can even find a secret room when you jump through a painting. There are portraits of the dog all over in this room, and even outside of the painting that you jump through, you can find dog toys in a dog food bowl. This implies that when Verso was a young boy, he loved playing with his toys and his dog, so much so that he brought them to life in the canvas as Minoko and Esquier. Minoko being the family dog makes so much sense when you consider that Verso and Minoko inside the canvas are best friends, because dogs are man's best friend after all. My headcanon for the reason that Minoko can shapeshift inside the canvas is because when young boy Verso was playing with his dog Minoko, he would imagine him as different creatures when they were playing. I still don't have a great take on the foot thing. Maybe he was one of those dogs that just liked licking his owner's feet. Don't ask me on that. As far as Esquier goes, he was Verso's favorite toy. This explains why he can fly fast and why he's so powerful. Esquier was probably the main character to Verso when he was playing with his toys. The Esquier plush was also there for Verso when Verso was feeling sad and needed a hug. This is directly portrayed inside the canvas. Verso painted Esquier to be his protector and his friend. And since Esquier is made after a plush, this explains why he's so childlike. Maybe Esquier likes rocks so much because when Verso was a child he would also play with rocks? Just a thought. It is apparent that Verso also painted the gestrals, the fun-loving goofballs we see all throughout our adventure. In gestral culture, when they die, they undergo a ceremony where they are to be reborn in the sacred river. They are placed inside these jars, which makes it so much more hard-hitting when we see Noko placed into one of these jars, and then we realize all the jars we've been seeing up to this point throughout the game have all been dead gestrals. Like I said a long time ago, the world building in this game, mwah, chef's kiss. Anyway, after Noko dies, Minoko makes it clear that Noko can be resurrected, but he will come back as a different Noko. He will be a Gestral, but of a different soul. It almost feels like reincarnation. This whole thing, to me, also references the Descendre family as well. When Alicia finds the two dogs in the epilogue, their names are Noko and Minoko, but one of them is called Minoko the Third. This tells me that when their dogs die, they get a new one and possibly give them the same name. But of course, it's not the same dog. It's not the same soul. Even painted Verso himself could be an example of gestral reincarnation. He is Verso, but of a different soul. And my theory as to why the gestrals like to fight is, come on, boys. We all had toys as a kid, right? And we all made them fight. They were fighting all the time. Those battles were truly glorious. Since it is confirmed that Verso did create this canvas world, it is heartbreaking when we see things like the Ferris wheels that are broken and the carousels that no longer work. Like right when we get to Stonewave Cliffs in the story, we see a tipped over Ferris wheel. It is clear that this canvas is now a war zone. It is a shell of its former glory. And then getting into Act 2, you see the Forgotten Battlefield, which is definitely something that wasn't there before. You find Minoko Station and all the torn up train tracks. That's not how it's supposed to be. We know that there used to be many, many more gestrels throughout the canvas. Throughout our playthrough, we see entire cities of them just dead, waiting to be reborn. The queue to get into the Sacred River is extremely long. To my knowledge, there were no humans inside the canvas before Aline created them. There were just gestrels, Grandis. Verso and his siblings were the only humans inside, but they created this place as a play place. There were no other humans. We know that the Desandre family is full of artists, but later on, we learn that Verso preferred writing music over painting. I believe that the pressure from his parents forced him to paint even though his heart was in music. And I believe that he had to wear a mask around them. This is why I think it's so powerful when you walk into the opera house in Lumiere and you see the fading boy playing piano. The mask thing is very important because we know that the visage was created by Renoir. Renoir painted him after Verso. There are even scenes at camp where Verso plays piano with Maël and helps Lune write a new song. This painter Verso versus musician Verso is very significant when we get to the ending, because the fading boy at the end is sick of painting. This is not who Verso is, and who creates good art when they're being forced to do so instead of having a passion for it? I believe this is Sandfall calling out AAA studios, because Verso does love music, but in Maël's ending, he does not want to play music because he is being forced to. The best art does not come from being forced to create it, it comes from the soul. Another factoid that I want to point out is that we see Gustav and Verso's moveset are very similar at times. It's not lazy, it really doesn't feel like a reskin. And stop me if this sounds like cope, but I really believe there's lore significance to this choice. I believe that Aline created Gustav to give Maël an older brother figure, since Maël lost Verso in real life. I mean, come on, you can even be really diabolical and put Gustav's hair on Verso. They share the same weapons even. When you are inside the monolith in Act 2, the party sees a gravestone in the Forgotten Battlefield where Verso was buried. But on the headstone there is a visage face, which directly connects to Verso. I'm not saying they are the same person, but I'm saying there is plenty of evidence to support the fact that they are connected heavily. They made a reskin make sense in the lore. Sandfall, you're something else. It is eventually learned that Expedition 33 is the first expedition to use Gustav's invention, the Lumina Converter. You know, the thing that gives us a million passives and allows us to become gods? Yes, that Lumina Converter. Expedition 33 was so successful because of Gustav. I don't think they would have been able to do it without Gustav, especially because you wouldn't have been able to use painted power on more than one person without the Lumina Converter, and then you're definitely not beating Renoir. With the Lumina Converter, he carved a path, so to say, for all future generations, just like the expeditions before him. Gustav, we miss you. You're an absolute king. I would also like to point something out that's kind of strange. When viewing Verso's gravestone, we can see that Verso died on December 33rd. And if you're one of those people who have ever read a calendar at any point in their life, you would know that December 33rd is very far into the year. No, but for real, why does Verso's gravestone have a death date on it that doesn't exist? Could this imply that the world that we've been playing in is actually a canvas within a canvas? I mean, the Desandre family have painting powers that allows them to create whole worlds. That obviously doesn't exist in our world, right? Could this be extremely meta and imply that the Desandre family exists inside Sandfall's canvas? There is further evidence to support this, considering that the Endless Tower takes place inside its own canvas, which is a canvas inside the canvas. The Fading Woman makes it clear that all canvases play by their own rules. I have noticed in interviews that Sandfall has been very particular and careful about the information they reveal about the backstory of this game. For example, even scrubbing through everything in this game, we have very, very limited knowledge on the Writers Guild. Could something be coming that could flip everything we know on its head? Another elite level twist like this game has? In general, when it comes to the lore, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. The devs have stated that still to this point, not every secret in the game has been uncovered. You know what that means. Reddit cipher people, please do your thing. I have come up with my own theory, and I know that this sounds crazy, but I feel like there might be a hidden third ending to this game. At the end of Act 2, Verso reads Alicia's letter, and Alicia wrote this letter for Maël. In the letter, Alicia reveals that Renoir and Aline are both fighting their own wars, with Aline trying to save the canvas and Renoir trying to destroy it, with, like we said earlier, both endings having negative consequences. But in this letter, Alicia says that Mael might have the power to find common ground between them and find a better way. It might be one of those convoluted, hidden endings like in Sekiro where you have to do wacky shit that doesn't even make sense half the time. Maybe you have to find some kind of hidden items or solve some hidden puzzles to unlock this ending. I don't know how well any of this will age, but I just want you to know that if, for some reason, the stars align and this happens, you heard it here first. Another game in the Clair Obscur series has been confirmed, and a lot of these answers to the lore might be answered in that. I personally don't think we're going to see any more of Verso's Canvas. I think that story is over. I think they're going to take the Final Fantasy approach, where they're going to have completely new stories, possibly in different canvases, but reusing a lot of the same maybe enemy names or enemy types. And if we do get similar enemy types, possibly with the same names but with a different design like they do in Final Fantasy, if these end up being Nevrons, this implies that Clair is involved in these other canvases as well because Nevrons are her creations. It is implied in Verso's ending that Mael could go on and paint her own canvas, and maybe the sequel to this game will take place in one of her canvases. Much like in the way that we always see a character named Cid in the Final Fantasy games, who always end up being a different character but always has the same name, maybe we'll get another Gustav, who's a completely different character, or another Ciel, or another Lune. In any case, you can already consider the next game pre-ordered. There's definitely more to Verso's lore. I didn't even mention the Julie stuff, but I would like to move on to Aline and her contributions to the canvas and her artwork. Aline is the paintress, the crying woman we could always see in the distance that we've come to know and love. Verso's death hit her very hard, so much so that she went into Verso's canvas and continued to work on it to further his legacy. She painted the people of Lumiere, such as Gustave and Sophie, Lune and Ciel. She came into the canvas to preserve Verso's memory, but Renoir did not approve, because Renoir could see that this canvas was consuming her life. It is because of this that Aline went into the canvas and painted her own family. She painted her own Renoir, Alicia, Verso, and Clair to be much more warm towards her than the real ones, to be who she wanted them to be, not who they really were. She painted Verso, the one that we play as in our party. And since she missed Verso so much, she wanted this painted version of Verso to be as close to the real thing as possible. So she painted all of real Verso's memories inside of this painted Verso, including the miserable ones, like the fact that he died in a fire. This plays into the fact that painted Verso wants to die so bad, but he can't, because Aline made sure to paint her painted family immortal. Or at least make them immortal enough for them to be the last thing that Renoir can gommage. The way she painted Renoir is the most obvious one. This is, of course, the Renoir we see slaughter all of Expedition 33 in the beginning of the game and kill our beloved Gustave. The one that we see protecting his family at the manor in Old Lumiere. The one that we see protecting the paintress at the top of the monolith. Aline painted this version of Renoir to be her husband, the husband she wished she had. To be a man supporting of Aline, to protect her when she needed it, someone who was strong, versus her real husband who she views as cowardly for trying to rip her out of the canvas. Since Aline wants to so badly protect the canvas, this makes sense as to why painted Renoir fights off the expeditions. And on first viewing, you might think it's strange that painted Renoir didn't battle painted Verso at the end of Act 1 when Gustave died. Well, that's because the whole point of the canvas is to preserve Verso's memory. Renoir doesn't want to hurt Verso. Aline's take on Alicia is much more cruel. She is a colorless, depressed girl who can't speak, who is cursed with having the burn marks as a reminder of what happened to Verso. The depressing reality here is, this painted Alicia is her own person. She had nothing to do with the events that killed Verso. She is living with a curse because of the actions of someone else. Aline blames Alicia for Verso's death, and unfortunately, the interpretation inside the canvas is that of malice. Then lastly, there's Aline's take on her daughter Clair, but her take on Clair is somewhat unknown. We get some hints that she is a loving person when we read some of the Simon logs, but by the time we find painted Clair in the Flying Manor, she's already been altered by the real Clair. But I want to get more into this Clair specifically in the next section when we talk about Superbosses. Aline's art style is that of realism. We can tell because almost every painting that we see her paint in this world, the people of Lumiere, her painted family, they're all modeled after real humans. which is very different from how Renoir paints his family inside this canvas. He paints each member of his family as an axon. These guys don't appear human, but they inherit a lot of the traits that he believes that his family has. When the party reaches the Axon Islands, there are different enemies here. These aren't Nevrons. See, Nevrons were created by Clair, but the enemies on the Axon Islands are not Nevrons, because they were painted by Renoir himself to protect his axons. Unlike Aline, Renoir painted these interpretations of his family not to be who he wants them to be, but how he actually views them as how they are. Let's start with the Visages, or Verso, also known as the Axon, he who guards the truth with lies. As mentioned earlier, Renoir believes that Verso always put on a different face around his family. The first phase of the boss is the mask of the real boss, which is in the second phase, the Mask Keeper. Let's talk about the three masks we find on the island before the expedition goes and fights the main boss. There's a mask of joy, a mask of sadness, and a mask of anger. Wearing a mask is a very common metaphor for hiding your anxieties and your true self. He who guards the truth with lies is a quote you hear many times throughout this level. The quote can even contrast itself. That's Clair Obscur. When interpreting the line, he who guards the truth with lies, is this person doing so to protect others from the truth or to manipulate others to get their way? To cover up parts of the story for personal gain? Even Minoko is asked this question where he answers, yes. And this quote with these two descriptions describes Verso very well. Around the expedition, Verso wears a metaphorical mask, giving them just enough information to keep going, but not enough to make them his enemies. Because obviously, if the expedition knew killing the paintress would end their existence, they wouldn't have helped Verso. When speaking to one of these three masks, they are describing a person, and obviously they're all describing Verso, right? But I think one of each of the three masks is describing a different version of Verso. When talking to the Joy Mask, it describes a person who is happy in their youth that is creating a world that they love. This is obviously the real-world Verso who died in the fire, who created the canvas. The Sadness Mask then describes someone who is forced to paint even though they really don't want to, and it's causing them to become depressed. This I believe to be the young boy that's missing their face, the one we find at the end of the game. The fading boy is the last shred of Verso's soul, and I believe the fading boy represents the real essence that Verso put into his canvas, the love that he put into his canvas. He's literally pouring his soul into his art. The Anger Mask describes someone who is very upset that they must keep living on with a life they don't want. This obviously has to represent Painted Verso, the one in our party. Each one of the three different masks is describing Verso, but very much a different version of Verso. Three separate entities. All three of the masks' levels have the same exact level layout, but they have enemy placements that are different and item placements that are very different, as well as the overall tone of each area is different. The level's tone matching that of the mask that you're approaching. It is almost as if each of these three stages are same, but different, like cousins. Shout out to my boy Esquier. Let's move on to Renoir's interpretation of his wife Aline, also known as Seren, also known as she who plays with wonder. I believe the quote, she who plays with wonder, represents the way that Aline toys with life inside the canvas. Renoir acknowledges Aline is beautiful, because when we enter the Seren area, there she is. She's stunning. She's serene, if you will, dancing with elegance. But I believe Renoir is also trying to tell the audience that Aline is manipulative, because Verso says that if you look into Seren's eyes, you'll go crazy. You'll be put under her control. Renoir believes that Aline plays with others' emotions to get her way. I believe Seren's real face to be trapped behind a mask with a tiny hole, and the hole represents her narrow view on the family drama situation. She is painted to sweep everyone up with her strong emotions. Seren shows after images of the expeditioner's lost ones. Ciel sees her dead husband and her unborn baby. Lune ends up seeing her parents. Maël sees Gustave, and Minoko sees Noko. Verso doesn't see anyone, and he is just aura farming, because he knows what Seren is doing. I think this entire phenomenon is Renoir trying to tell us that Aline paints fake images of the dead to make their loved ones feel better, the exact same way that she does with Verso inside the canvas. Let's move on to the Hauler. The Hauler is the dead axon that we see in Old Lumiere with a sword in its skull. This axon represents Clea. This axon appears with a ton of buildings on its back weighing it down. I believe that this is Renoir trying to tell us that Clea takes all of her family's burdens and puts them on herself, crushing under the weight of them. Before Renoir arrived, Clea took on the burden of trying to solve the canvas problem before she left. She is also trying to march ahead and take care of the writers all on her own without Renoir's help. Renoir believes all this weight will crush her. When we get to Old Lumiere, we find the Fading Man, and if you notice, the Fading Man is always waiting for us specifically inside the Axon areas. That's because the Fading Man represents Renoir. The Fading Man is always in these areas to give the party a perspective on what it means to be one of these Axons. When approaching the hauler in Old Lumiere, we can find the Fading Man, and the Fading Man tells us that Clea loved art, all kinds of art, so much that it saddened her that she couldn't consume all of it in the world. She was so overwhelmed with how much she had to consume, did she even really appreciate it anymore, the things that she did consume? I also believe that the weight on her back represents all the art that she tried to consume, and she tried to consume too much of it that it killed her. I mean, think about it. This is a reflection on our society. So much fiction and media comes out nowadays that it is impossible to consume all of it, even though a lot of us want to try to consume as much of it as possible. All the stuff that we're interested in anyway. But in our busy lives, something like this just isn't realistic. We should stop cramming so much of this down our throat and really just appreciate the things that we do appreciate. We have to accept the fact that we won't experience all this stuff that we wish, and I believe this directly coincides with the hauler's design. Oversaturation really causes us to avoid appreciating real art. That so much slop is being released nowadays that we focus on consuming it instead of what's good. Lastly, let's talk about the Reacher, or She Who Grasps the Sky, aka Alicia. The Reacher area is a giant tower that's being built to literally reach the sky. It is in this area where we learn that Renoir's favorite child is Alicia. Renoir believes that Alicia has so much potential as an artist that she could reach the sky if she tried. Renoir wants Alicia to reach her true potential, but sees Verso's canvas as a distraction and in the way of that. At one point, Maëlle mentions that she has vertigo, which is essentially a fear of heights, where you feel sick and dizzy. This is symbolic because even though Renoir believes that Alicia can reach new heights, Maëlle is scared to. Maybe vertigo represents her addiction to the canvas and unable to reach these new heights outside the canvas. I believe that orphelins are just the mass populace, consuming the art. When Ciel asks if the orphelins are building the tower or destroying it, Minoko notes that they are jealous. I believe that the orphelins are doing both. Some are building Maëlle up and some are tearing her down. The whole idea of the Reacher Axon is that Renoir believes she will reach the stars. She will become a famous, world-renowned painter. Some give her gifts. They literally give her wings. Her true fans want her to fly, and she wouldn't be able to fly without their help. And then again, some want to destroy her tower and tear her back down. Renoir believes that she will become famous. She'll have loving fans, but also detractors. I love this shot where the wings line up behind her, telling us that she will one day have wings and fly. Now think about it. Every person's gradient attacks kind of play into their story. Maëlle has a gommage because she's a paintress. Verso can gain an extra life because he's immortal. But notice Maëlle has a phoenix flame ability, where she gains wings behind her and has her painted friends resurrect. It's almost like if she gets these wings and becomes a paintress, a world-renowned painter, she can create any lives that she wants, like Aline does in the canvas. Upon reaching the top of the Reacher area, we find Painted Alicia protecting the Reacher Axon. I believe that Painted Alicia protects the Axon because Painted Alicia believes that they are one and the same. After all, Painted Alicia and the Reacher Axon both represent the real Alicia. And since Painted Alicia wasn't given a real chance to thrive, she is selfless and does everything she can for the Axon to make sure the Axon can thrive. Upon reaching the top of the Reacher area, Maëlle and Painted Alicia have a battle. After beating Painted Alicia, she reveals that she is also in pain and wants to let go. And with Maëlle's newfound paintress powers, Maëlle grants her this wish. Renoir also painted all the creatures we see in Act 3 Lumiere, as well as all the creatures we see in Renoir's drafts, besides Simon, because Renoir's drafts is beneath the monolith, where he was said to be trapped. That's all I've got for Renoir. I would like to say everything that Clea contributed to the canvas, but I'm going to wait until the next section. So to end this section off, let's talk about Alicia's lore. Alicia, or Maëlle, didn't paint very much inside this canvas, because she doesn't even discover that she's a paintress until Act 3 of the game. In fact, Mael didn't even paint herself. When entering the canvas, Alicia was consumed with Aline's chroma, so technically, Mael is one of Aline's paintings. The only thing we ever really see her paint outside of her ending is the soldiers that storm Lumiere and assist the expedition in Act 3. Now we know Aline painted Alicia to be part of her family, which is an unflattering painting of Alicia because she can't speak. She's a sad girl with burn marks on her face. But when the real Alicia enters the canvas, why is she not similar? Why is Mael normal? Why were her memories wiped of the real world and reborn as Mael? Was erasing her memories and giving her a new life manipulation? Or was it trying to give her a new life in the canvas? Was this a second chance for Alicia? Did Aline erase her memories so she could forget about the death of Verso and live happily within the canvas, without the burden of knowing what's happening outside? Here's an interesting tidbit. Since Alicia changed her name to Mael, both of those names affiliate with the same person, right? Well, as it turns out, the song Alicia in the OST, as well as the song Mael in the OST, are almost exactly the same song, but a little different. They have the same melody and the instrumentation is exactly the same, but the lyrics are tweaked a little bit. The song Alicia's lyrics are a mishmash of different languages, making it very hard to tell what the song is about, essentially to avoid spoilers. But the Mael song is completely coherent and can be perfectly translated. The Alicia song is played right at the beginning of the game, at the start screen. It's the first thing you hear, it's iconic. And then the Mael song plays at the end of Mael's ending. We established that the Alicia to Mael name change is more of a Saul Goodman and Jimmy McGill moment. So this tells me that Alicia doesn't really know who she is. It's a life she doesn't want. That's why the lyrics are scrambled. But the Mael song has perfectly recognizable lyrics, meaning that Mael knows who she wants to be. It's clear. This is her life. That's my take on it anyway, and I know this whole lore section was a lot, but I think a lot of this stuff comes naturally with how well the story is told. The smaller details really do come around on a second playthrough. A second playthrough is incredible because all these cryptic lines of dialogue that I was talking about, from white Nevrons to the fading people, they all begin to make sense lore-wise. By the end of the game, all the context that you need to solve all the puzzles from before is given to you. The white Nevrons speak of a mistress, who you are led to believe is the paintress, but actually turns out to be Clea. The fading boy, the fading woman, and the fading man, who turn out to be the soul of Verso, Clea, and Renoir respectively, end up having a ton to say about the story from their point of view. At one point, Verso mentions to Mael that Gustav lives on in other ways even though he's not here physically anymore, such as the influences on her life. That's what I believe the fading people to be, the spirit of Verso, Clea, and Renoir inside the canvas. All of the heart and soul they put into painting inside this canvas. If you've beaten the game and you're interested in seeing how these things develop, I highly recommend a second playthrough. Here's a really cool touch that I guarantee you did not pick up on playthrough number 1. If you go and look where the curator is standing at camp, you can see there's another clearing where he has a perfect view of the paintress and her monolith. It makes sense because the curator's ultimate goal is to take down the paintress, and he always has his eyes on the prize. The attention to detail in this game is second to none. To me, it genuinely feels like everything makes sense and connects to each other lore-wise in this game. Even down to the smallest little details, like when your party gets inverted, it actually looks like a splash of paint was thrown on them. It's as if one of the painters is trying to ruin the painting of the other painter. If you like stories with a lot of depth to them and have a lot of well thought out deep lore, this game scratches that itch. Before I dive into the next section, I just want to show off this really cool image that I found online. Credit to whoever made this. I'm sorry, I'm not sure who created this. It is an excellent visual guide. It really helps you see how each painter plays into the story and what their creations are. Pause if you want to really look at it, but thank you to whoever made this. You're a hero. Now I would like to quickly segue into something that I absolutely love about this game, as if I haven't been doing that non-stop already. As a big-time Souls fan, I can confidently say that I absolutely love a challenging, teeth-grinding, hard but fair boss battle in a video game. That's actually my favorite part about Souls games. It's the main reason I replay them. Intricate, well-designed boss mechanics, paired with that sweet dopamine hit that you receive upon overcoming a very difficult challenge. It's that sweet, buttery dopamine that I'm always craving. And if you've already played this game before, you know exactly where this is going. Expedition 33 has two superbosses, although technically more superbosses. I guess it really depends on how you define a superboss. I believe two of them are far more imposing than any other enemy you fight in the game, and these two, of course, are Painted Clair and Simon. Let's begin with the daughter of Aline's painted family within the canvas, Clair. We see very little of Clair in this game. We see her in the Alicia epilogue in between Acts 2 and 3, and she's also in the Verso's ending cutscene. And we oftentimes see the painted family throughout our journey, but we only see painted Clair for this one boss fight. Yet, with lore deep dives, we learn so much about these two characters, especially the real Clair, their impact that they had within the story. Clair is a pretty complicated character, and most information that we find out about her comes from digging through the game pretty deep. When we first meet her, she is the messenger that drops the bombshell that is the twist of this game. She mentions this war between painters and writers. She mentions Verso's death to us, and how Alicia is at fault for Verso's death. We learn that Clair is a painting prodigy. Even within her family, she is the most talented painter among them. We also learn that Clair is the only painter talented enough to paint over someone else's painting, thus taking control of them. Painted Clair is Aline's daughter. Aline painted her to be her daughter, but the real Clair came in and painted over this painted Clair to do her bidding. I hope that jumble of words made sense. We also eventually find out that Clair painted over Simon because Simon was another one of Aline's paintings, but we'll get into Simon later. We learn that there's a force in the background known as the Writers Guild, which is in direct opposition to the Painters Guild. The writers are most known by manipulating Alicia into letting them into the manor to burn it down, which was the cause for Verso's death. The writers are the main culprit for Verso's death, but of course Alicia blames herself, and the rest of the Desandre family, aside from Renoir, blame Alicia as well. Since Clair's parents are distracted inside Verso's canvas, Clair has now taken it upon herself to fight the war against the writers. We know that Clair used to play with Verso inside the canvas. They used to have all sorts of fun in there. She loved Verso, so her motivation to take these writers down is purely out of revenge for her brother. At some point, Clair entered the canvas to try to pull her parents out of it to help with the writers' war. We find out that Clair is the creator of Nevrons, because upon examining the manor, if we look inside Clair's room, we find statues and paintings of Nevrons. And that is what Clair is forcing Painted Clair to do, to continuously paint Nevrons against her will, in order to speed up the process of taking both of her parents outside of the canvas, because this is a place she loved so much. I believe that the white Nevrons are unfinished sketches from Clair, which explains why they don't have the directive to kill. Clair is a tragic character. She is grieving too, she's just grieving in her own way, by trying to get revenge against the writers. Although Clair is not heartless, she just grew up too fast and got caught up in her family's war. Clair used to have a heart of gold before this conflict with the canvas ruined everything, the same way it ruined the other family members. The same way that Verso has Esquier, Clair had Francois, Esquier's next door neighbor. He's discovered to be an old friend of Clair, which tells me that Francois was one of Clair's childhood toys the same way that Esquier was for Verso. Clair is no longer inside this canvas when we're playing the game. This is why Francois is so sad and bitter. It's because he misses his best friend. Clair left Francois to go play adult in the real world. Francois hasn't seen Clair in ages. Even that prick next door neighbor to Esquier has deep character development. Although we actually see so little of Clair throughout the game, her fingerprints are left everywhere throughout the world. Her Nevrons are everywhere, in our way constantly. The white Nevrons and the fading people talking about her all the time. She created the painted workshops and even the Endless Tower, and upon reaching the top of the Endless Tower, we fight the boss Painted Love. This boss is painted versions of the curator and the paintress working together. Maybe Clair painted them this way because of her desire for her parents to just work together instead of against each other. Despite what she tells us, I think she does have a deep love for her parents. While inside the canvas, Clair tried to take out Aline's painted family, and that's when she learned that they were immortal. Clair is extremely powerful, but she can't kill the unkillable. So if you can't kill them, take control of their mind. Painted Clair is a walking Nevron factory that we find at the top of Flying Manor, ready for a battle. Her arena is completely made up of Nevron parts, like it's a workshop where she's actively creating Nevrons. In order to access her chambers, In the Flying Manor area, you have to go down several paths and kill repainted boss versions of Nevrons that we fought before, such as Go Blue and the Giga Chad Duelist. After all of that, her door will open to her workshop and you can go in and fight her. Aline created Painted Clea to love Verso, as well as the rest of her family. However, she is being controlled by the real Clea, which forces her hand. She wants to love Verso, but her mind control takes over, and then she begins to start painting Nevrons. The main gimmick of this fight, Clea does not directly attack you at all. She paints Nevrons that attack you. It is so genuinely fun to learn all these Nevrons' parry timings because you fight so many of them throughout the game, and this serves as a test. The Nevrons in this fight use the exact same attacks that they've used all throughout the game. However, during one of Clea's attacks, 4 or 5, maybe 6 Nevrons are attacking you at the same time. It's almost as if you're having to learn an entirely new attack because these Nevron attacks layer over each other, but these attacks are so familiar on their own, so they almost click a little faster. You'll learn these combos faster than you think. Familiar attacks, yet new complex parry patterns to learn. I have never seen a boss design like this. It's one of the most creative takes on a boss that I've ever seen. These attacks are so painfully familiar, yet foreign. It's a natural test, and the fight is almost nostalgic in a way, reminding you of all the steps that it took to get to this point. She's a test of game knowledge, your muscle memory, and a test of pure skill. It is the perfect package. Clea also has a healing mechanic, which is very similar of Melania from Elden Ring, where if even one of these hits in this long combo hit you, she's going to heal 500,000 damage. This means unless you're going for a one-shot build, you actually need to learn these combos if you want to beat her. You must limit mistakes on defense or this fight could last forever. There is a lot of fun and a lot of frustration to be had with this boss, but eventually you will best her. Once you best her, you will get a cutscene where Verso approaches her, and he can see that his real sister is still in there somewhere. They go to touch hands, but something pulls Clea back. This I believe to be the real Clea's control. It's similar to Mael's ending, when Verso refuses to play the piano, but the push of Mael's paintress powers forces him to. This means that Painted Clea is programmed to slave away and paint Nevrons endlessly and is unable to do anything else, forced to become some robot. She then summons a bunch of Nevrons to take her life. She was suffering and she wanted to end her suffering, the same way that Painted Alicia and Painted Verso, her siblings, wanted to do. Now, if you think that boss was cool, take a look at this Giga Chad. This motherfucker you see here is Simon. He has a gigantic health pool with extremely punishing combos and tons of different game mechanics that are unique to this fight that are also very punishing. He has an extremely high attack stat, almost always one or two shotting you. First though, let's give this guy a backstory. Simon was simply a citizen of Lumiere and part of Expedition Zero as well. At some point, he met Painted Clea, long before she became corrupted, and they fell in love. Sometime later, the real Clea entered the canvas. She then met Simon and pretended to be Painted Clea in order to manipulate him. Just like how Clea painted over Painted Clea, she also painted over Simon to do her bidding. Clea gave Simon incredible power, which you will quickly learn when Simon brings his belt to your ass for about 2 or 3 hours. I mean, Clea painted over the 2 most powerful bosses that you will fight in this game, which just goes to show how talented of a painter Clea is. We know that Painted Clea is Aline's take on her daughter, and we know that the Hauler, the Axon, is Renoir's take on Clea as well. Well, as it turns out, Clea was not very happy or satisfied with the interpretations her parents had for her. Clea thought that the Hauler was a disrespectful depiction of herself, so she has Simon go and execute the Hauler. That's why we can see Simon's sword inside the Hauler's skull. It should also be noted that all these glowing weapons you see throughout Lumiere are Simon's weapons as well. He 1v1 an Axon and won. Upon killing the Hauler, Simon gained enough chroma to take on his next task. Clea, still acting as Painted Clea, Simon's love, manipulates Simon into killing the paintress to push her parents out of the canvas. Simon uses his newfound chroma to pierce the barrier, and he ascends the monolith to face the paintress. It is here where Simon learns the truth, that the real threat to the canvas is beneath the monolith in Renoir. Simon doesn't want to be erased. He's part of this canvas. He learns that Clair has been manipulating him this whole time. The paintress tells him the truth. Simon descends the monolith, goes beneath to find Renoir in Renoir's drafts. Obviously, Simon failed to take down Renoir because Renoir is still alive, and Simon is trapped within Renoir's depths. That's where we can find him for the boss fight. Renoir's power overwhelms Simon, and it drives him mad. I believe we see the same glowing weapons down in the Simon arena because Simon had an equally epic battle with Renoir the same way he did with the Hauler. Simon is another tragic character who was just trying to do the right thing. He was trying to save the canvas so the love of his life, painted Clair, could live on. Just like Aline's other creations that are suffering, it's time to set Simon free. The pathway and then the eventual fall into his arena is epic. This Humpty Dumpty ass great fall reminds me of the fall into Midir's arena in DS3. When making an epic boss, the cinematography is everything as well. Verso recognizes Simon, realizing that Clair had taken over his old friend. So, the duel begins. Simon is a 3-phase boss fight, with all 3 phases being harder than the last. He switches up his moveset in all 3 phases, but there are always 3 moves that he has in each phase that stay consistent. These 3 attacks all gain an additional hit on top of their original hit with each phase that you go through. What I mean by this is picture a moveset with 2 hits. When you get to phase 2, this 2-hit combo will become a 4-hit combo because the first hit will have 2 parries on it, and then the second hit will then have 2 parries on it. The third phase, of course, adding a 3rd hit to each hit, tripling the amount of moves you need to parry. Unfortunately for you and me, he doesn't have 2-hit combos. He has a long combo that has 6 hits, so by the time you get to the 3rd phase, you're having to dodge or parry 18 hits. Like I said before, you're going to die to Simon. This boss is so challenging, thus that much more satisfying to overcome. Once you perfectly parry and counterattack that 18-hit combo, it's gonna feel good. Mastering his entire moveset is so rewarding, especially when he's been one-shotting and two-shotting your party for the better part of 2 or 3 hours. He also has several unique mechanics to his boss fight. One of these mechanics, after each of his turns, he will always pick a random expeditioner and siphon their health all the way down to 1 HP. Playing around with this mechanic is difficult because if your health is at 1 HP, obviously you're one-shot. It's going to encourage you to learn his moveset faster, and it's also going to make you weigh the pros and cons of healing versus attacking, like I was saying earlier. Another mechanic I want to talk about is the fact that Clair made him so powerful that he has the ability to gommage your party. He can completely take them out of the canvas. At the very beginning of all of his moves, he will check to see if any of your expeditioners are dead, and if they are dead, he will completely remove them from the canvas. There's little room for error here. You have to make sure all of your expeditioners are alive and well before he takes another turn. You need to be reviving. He is also unfortunately very fast, and if he ever takes 2 turns in a row, he might kill you on his first turn, and then he takes his second turn and sees that you're dead and he will erase you. Sometimes you don't even get a chance to revive your expeditioner. If you see that any of your party members are dead, it is absolutely mandatory to revive them. Even if you have a big attack cooked up for Simon, you need to just swallow your pride and revive anyway. This mechanic makes momentum shift in the blink of an eye. You could be having a very good run, a consistent 5 to 7 minutes of constantly cooking Simon, and then one slip up, your parties are dead, and they are gommaged from the canvas, just like that. You never truly have the upper hand in this battle until you actually see him die. The fact that he is so punishing and you are oftentimes healing and reviving constantly throughout this fight makes it very hard to find a rhythm and get an offensive flow state that you're satisfied with, especially for your designated healer. Once you get Simon's health bar to maybe 3/4 of the way down during phase 2, he will enter phase 3, and upon entering phase 3, he will gommage your entire party, just like that. This is unavoidable, unless of course you one-shot him during phase 2 to entirely skip phase 3. In order to continue with phase 3, you are forced to use your reserve team, the other 2 characters that aren't in your main party. This means if you ever used your reserve party during phase 1 or 2, your reserve party will get gommaged and you will just automatically lose the battle. You need to make it to this point with your primary party. Also, if you have only been playing with 3 characters and neglecting the other 2 characters your entire playthrough, this is where you're going to pay for it. Barring luck and just getting really good at the parry timings, you really need to make sure all 5 of your characters are built well to be ready for this fight. I would like to bring up the OST for this battle, which is called We Lost, which is not only one of the biggest bangers in the whole game, but appropriately named. Before Sandfall settled on the title Expedition 33, this game was originally titled We Lost, and this song is a direct homage to this. This song gives an absolute grandiose feel to a grandiose battle. It's very fitting. This is a highly skill-dependent fight and one of the most difficult in gaming, if you ask me. But after a bit too many attempts, he will fall. I promise you. Be patient, don't give up, keep persevering. You will get this. After the battle, Simon will silently thank Verso for setting him free. He gives Verso his sword and then fades away. Of course, you can actually equip this weapon on Verso, and it is absolutely incredible, by the way. It's a fantastic reward for a challenging fight in which, if you want, you can redo. Sandfall acknowledges that the people that crave challenge are going to want to refight Simon over and over again, so they give you the option to rebattle him as many times as you want. Thank God I don't have to replay through the entire game if I just simply want to rebattle Simon. Thank you, Sandfall. These two boss fights that I just talked about, including a lot of the story-relevant bosses in this game, completely blew away my expectations for what I want in a good boss battle. My top 5 or 6 bosses in this game comfortably sit in the list of my favorite boss fights in video games as a whole. Expedition 33 will provide you with some of the best boss fights you're going to find in gaming in 2025, period. Fighting Simon and Clair in this game are two of my favorite optional side objectives that you can take on. But that really isn't all. This game is loaded with side content. There is plenty to do in this game with a map that feels very full, with tons and tons of optional levels and battles. You will be busy outside of the main story. I absolutely love the side content in this game. It's phenomenal side content. These two super bosses are a prime example of that. And I absolutely hate side content that feels like filler. The side content in this game enhances the lore and the story. Some of it even feels like it's a part of the main story. The side content is really good about providing answers to a lot of the questions you had throughout the main story, such as the Clair fight, which tells you where Neverons originate, and the Simon fight, which tells you who killed the Hauler. All the side areas are also uniquely designed as well. Just because they aren't technically main levels doesn't mean the developers didn't put a lot of love into making these levels feel unique. For example, you have the Reacher level, where you find the Reacher Axon. This place feels so much unlike anything else we've seen in the game. You have the Reacher Tower and all the Orphelins building it. There's huge story significance to this area, but 100% optional. I feel as though that many games get side content wrong. Here's a solid example for you. Please don't execute me. Ghost of Tsushima. A game created by Sucker Punch, who's a studio that I have loved since I was a kid because it made one of my favorite games of all time right here. Ghost of Tsushima was a game that I absolutely loved. It had a fantastic story with an interesting protagonist. It had great combat and stealth sections, and the world was absolutely stunning to look at. It's still one of the most beautiful worlds I've ever seen in a game. Although I absolutely love Ghost, my biggest complaint with this game is the side stuff. 90% plus of the side missions is finding a random insignificant NPC, and then they force you to follow footsteps for 5 minutes, where you'll kill a bunch of Mongols, and then you'll return back to that NPC, and then they'll give you the quest reward. The side missions all felt so shallow because they all felt so samey, and didn't add anything to the overarching plot. They were filler, and unlike the main story missions in Ghost of Tsushima, the side missions feel tacked on like they were an afterthought. All of E33's side content feels so intentional. There's so much passion put into it, even though it is side content. And if the E33 side area that you're in doesn't add anything to the story or the lore, it's doing fantastic world building. And most importantly, every single piece of side content you do feels different from one another. There are a ton of small side areas that you can explore, but to a more impressive degree, there are bigger side levels, some of which are even bigger than a lot of the main levels. Some of these include Renoir's Drafts, Frozen Hearts, Yellow Harvest, Falling Leaves, and of course the Reacher. These areas give you brand new story significance, has you listening to brand new music, fighting brand new enemies, and brand new bosses. Some of the best design is in the side content. One of my favorite songs in this entire game, they put in the Reacher area. So a lot of people won't even witness this song. It's the battle theme for this area when you fight the Orphelins. It goes so hard. More side content includes the fabled and feared Gestral Beaches. You can find expedition logs, you can go help all the White Nevrons, which I highly recommend you do. And for the love of God, do not kill any of the White Nevrons, because if you complete all of their quests, you will get a hefty reward of 100 colors of Lumina. You want to get more power in your build? This is how you do it. You can, of course, go battle the insanely overpowered Mime, which you can only fight with one character, and whatever character you beat them with will be rewarded with the bald haircut. Look at the party right now. Don't you want them all to look like babies? This mime is difficult, but you've fought so many mimes up to this point, it's another test for you to see how well you know the mime moveset. Every one of your party members besides CL also has their own dedicated party quest. The Reacher is one of these and is associated with Mael. These companion quests develop these characters more than they already have been, and I believe these quests are very much worth doing for the simple fact that this is the only way you can unlock your level 3 gradient attacks, which are by far the best attacks in the game. There are more Gestral arenas you can find where you can beat up on more Julian tiny heads. Then there are these really small areas you can find, which often house a music disc or an expedition log. They offer a fixed camera shot with an absolutely stunning background to look at. These areas are paying homage to the original Final Fantasy backgrounds, the pre-rendered hand-drawn ones that we would explore throughout the games. You can indulge in more of Clair's story by doing all the painted workshops and then fighting the souped-up Lamp Master. These are locations where you can find Verso, the fading boy, and he will explain to you how sad it makes him that the sister he loves so much came into his canvas and painted these abominations. It actually breaks my heart a little bit. You can continue more of Clair's story at the Endless Tower. In fact, she's the one that created the Endless Tower. It's a place where you can test your skills and fight Nevrons and bosses that you've fought before, but much stronger. Lastly, a really interesting part of the game is opening up the Desandra Manor, the place in the story where you originally found Mael and the Curator in the Flying Waters. There are doors all over the individual levels and the overworld, which will teleport you to a new room within the manor. In these rooms there are many new secrets to find, not just literal items and outfits you can pick up, but also lore bits if you look hard enough, like getting teleported to the bedrooms of the Desandra family and looking at their decor and finding out more about them. Doing this is how I learned about what each painter brought to the canvas. Some of the secrets are even kind of hard to find, like spin this random frying pan in the kitchen 360 degrees and it'll open a secret door which will lead you to a new dress for Mael. It's so weird, but I love it. This whole manor provides so much more context to the lore and is so important when trying to piece everything together. There is so much to do outside of the main story in this game, I barely just scratched the surface. On my first playthrough, it took me roughly 30 hours to beat the main story with doing a little bit of side content baked in, and I ended up 100%ing that save with about 70 hours. Thank you for listening to me yap on about absolutely everything I love in this game, but we have to talk about the bad stuff. The list of complaints that I have for this game is a much shorter list than I would have for almost every other game that I've ever played. As if the video up to this point didn't make it obvious enough, all of the good things in this game far outweigh all the bad. So much so to the point that I genuinely don't think that the negatives in this game hinder the experience at all. One issue that I had, as well as many others, involves the Picto and Lumina system. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love this system, but it can't be ignored that there are so fucking many of them. If you ever get the urge to completely respec and rebuild your character from the ground up, be prepared for a ton of work. A solution that I've seen floating around the internet is to implement a loadout system. Something where you can save your weapons and Pictos and Lumina, everything you have for a build, into one package, and then you can later reload it at another time. This would make it so much easier to experiment with different builds because you wouldn't have to constantly deselect and reselect all sorts of Lumina, re-equip different skills all the time. If you just want to go for a break build for one battle, you can have all your characters have a break setting and then switch back and forth between all of them. Depending on the situation, you could have big damage Lune and healer Lune, and you could have burning Lune. I think a loadout system would be incredible like this, but I do see how it could take away from the experience as well. I think building your character a certain way, and then slowly tweaking them here or there throughout the game, really gives your characters, well, character. Being able to willy-nilly shift between different builds at will in between every single battle could take away all the personality into who you've made them. I think from an immersion standpoint, it's really important that each of these characters kind of fulfill their role through the whole story. So I sort of could go either way on this issue, but I'm kind of leaning towards the loadout side because it really helps on New Game Plus when you're just trying to play the game again and you're not really trying to go for character development when it comes to a build. You just want to experiment with different things. It would make it so much easier. I'm currently on New Game Plus 4, and I absolutely refuse to change any of my characters' builds because of how much work I've put into them and how much work it would be to change them. And I really wish that it was easier because on a fourth playthrough using the same build, it will begin to get stale. Of course, there are some optimization problems. This is unfortunately an Unreal Engine 5 game, and it comes packed full of all the visual stutters that those games are known for. The physics can be a little wonky at times, and depending on the skill that you use, the camera might go behind walls and completely obscure battle. Some facial expressions during battle can certainly be a weak spot. Sometimes when characters are speaking or even performing an attack, their faces remain expressionless. There were a couple instances where in the middle of battle the music would just stop, which should be illegal considering how good the music is in this game. Most notably for me it was the Frozen Hearts battle theme and the Minoko theme song, which is one of the best songs in the game. You can't do this! Another moment for me that was kind of weird, upon starting up New Game Plus for the first time, Gustav was accompanied by a war-torn expedition right at the beginning of the game. I get it, it's New Game Plus, but this is very immersion breaking. I mean, look at this, there's 2 Maels. This game features so many fun levels, so many cool and creative areas to explore. So many, in fact, that sometimes it's really hard to keep track of where you've been. While exploring the game, there are several times where I had to re-enter a level and see what it looked like just to make sure that I've already done it before. As far as I'm aware, there's no way to track where you've been, there's no map markers that you can place. It's a really small issue, but at one point or another you're going to get lost. You're going to forget which areas you've been in. And a lot of times you're going to get lost within the levels, although a lot of people kind of bitch and moan that there's no minimap within levels, but I don't think the levels personally are that hard to get around. There's even a lore reason as to why there isn't a minimap in the game. At the beginning, before the departure, Lune mentions that since no expedition has ever made it back, we don't have a map exactly. This place that we're going to is the complete unknown. It makes sense that there's no map. However, I do think it is very difficult to remember which locations you've actually been on the main map in the overworld. This can make it very tedious when you're in the endgame and you're trying to go for 100% and you just kind of have to gamble on if you've been in a location already. This game by no means is a 3D platformer. There are no Mario Odyssey vibes here, but for whatever reason, there are a surprising amount of platforming challenges in this game. Most infamously, the mile-high power tower on the Gestrel Beach. Even though this isn't a very tight platforming game, it somehow works. You can control your jump distance and where you land and your trajectory a lot better than you would think. I think Sandfall did a pretty decent job at implementing platform sections in a non-platforming game and made them not super rage-inducing. This wasn't a personal nitpick of mine. I actually think that the platforming is fine, but I've seen this complaint from a lot of people. I also wish there were more outfits, at least immersive ones. There are plenty of hairstyles, but most of the outfit selections are just super unrealistic. I'm trying to role play here, okay? I want war-torn, tattered, bloody, with holes, expedition uniforms. Maybe alternative uniforms that they may have packed for the trip. But no, I just have to sit and stare at Verso's bulge in a swimsuit most of the game. The swimsuits themselves, they make sense when you visit a gestural beach. I mean, I get it, you wear your swimsuit at the beach. But more often than not, I found myself just always wearing the default outfit. I had another headcanon moment where they did have their expeditioner uniforms on the whole game, but once it came around to Act 3 and it was discovered they were paintings, I just put them all in the most badass uniforms that I could think of. Conversations with your party at camp can be very touching, they're deep, they're emotional, they help you connect with the characters better. However, once you max out your relationship level with all your characters, they really have nothing to say anymore. After you max them out, they're just kind of there, standing around at camp with no more development. And I get it, you basically can't max out the relationship level until the very end of the game, and once you're at the end of the game, how much more is there to develop? But the problem that most people are going to run into is you're going to max out all these relationships, and then you're going to have 30 to 40 hours of side content to do. So during all those hours of side content, it felt like my party really had nothing to do. I almost wish there were more character dialogue or cutscenes at camp that were tied to different side objectives, just so you're still given something. And unfortunately for my first playthrough, I did everything in the entire game, all the side stuff, except kill Simon, and then I went and did Act 3. So in between Act 2 and Act 3, I had a 20 or 30 hour journey of the characters not really doing anything, and then once I did Act 3, then it concluded their character arcs, and there was just a big wide space in between of nothing. I did, in fact, do all the side stuff except Simon before beating the game. That is a good segue. The last thing I want to speak about in this section is the unfortunate overleveling problem. I did all the side stuff before killing Renoir, so overleveling, that's kinda on me. The game tries to curve this with being able to change the game's difficulty at any time, as well as these challenge modifiers that unlock in Act 3. You are able to modify the enemy's HP and increase it tenfold, sometimes 100-fold, and you can also put a cap limit on how much damage your characters can do. This is very nice for challenge runners and for making the enemies feel bulkier upon starting New Game Plus, but unfortunately it does not solve the overleveling problem. In fact, I tried this before doing Act 3, I turned my challenge modifiers all the way up, and I put the game into Expert. The battles did take longer and I wasn't able to one-shot everything. However, there are no enemy damage modifiers, so even though I was getting hit all the time, I really didn't have to parry or dodge anything because they did chip damage to me. I was never in danger, even on Expert mode. Plus, I was so overleveled that I was much faster than them. I would take 3 turns with my characters each before an enemy got a turn, and then when they did do their turn, they did no damage to me. My defense and my speed on all my characters was so high due to being in the late 80s by the time I made it to Act 3, it really didn't matter. Enemies could not touch me. These challenge modifiers did not make the fights harder, they just made the fights drag on and take forever. I could use a recoat or disable some Lumina, but I don't feel as though I should have to disassemble all of my character builds just to curve the difficulty. Especially when there's no Picto and Lumina loadout system. But I really don't think these problems aren't fixable. They could add new difficulty sliders that increase enemy speed or increase their attack stat. This could create for even more interesting challenge runs as well. Even if you don't break your characters in this game, I still feel like even on Expert, the story mode is just a little too easy. It is unfortunately very easy to overlevel because of how fun it is to fight everything. I did every enemy encounter. I wanted to keep battling in this game. If you even do a little bit of exploring or doing any side areas, you're going to overlevel. In order to get a fairly difficult experience, you have to just barrel through the story and do nothing else. And the game really encourages you to explore. It's fun to explore. That's why I did all that side stuff before Act 3, and then I had to pay for it there. It really dampened Act 3's final boss for me when that happened, that upon a repeat playthrough I had to experience it again, and then the fight actually became fun at a reasonable level. I loved the fight on the second time around. Maybe it's just a me problem because I like really challenging games, but I feel as though they should tweak some of the settings, maybe add a new difficulty after Expert, maybe make Expert just a little bit harder because Expert is supposed to be hard. Going back to the Act 3 Renoir fight, I already sort of ruined the Renoir fight for myself because I did the entire Endless Tower before fighting Renoir, and Painted Love is the final boss of the Endless Tower. I fought Painted Love before finishing the game. One half of Painted Love is the Renoir fight. He is one of the 2 bosses that you have to kill to finish that fight. So I already knew his moveset even when I went into the Act 3 fight. So this is my pro gamer tip of the entire video. After you finish Act 2, immediately go into Act 3. Don't do any side stuff in between, because if you overlevel and do all this other sorts of side stuff, you're going to ruin the impact of that final fight. There will be no urgency in it. You're just going to roll him over. That's the problem. I loved absolutely everything about the final fight in this game, and upon my first viewing I ruined it for myself. The Clair fight. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, she has a very low health pool, and I think it's to compensate for her huge heals, but as I stated before, I wish her health bar was bigger and her heals were smaller. Fighting the Clair boss was the last thing that I did before I went ahead and played through Act 3. So I still very much was at a high level and I had a pretty competent build, and I killed Clair in 2 hits. I had to reload my save, take Mael out of my party, and then fight her again to really appreciate the fight. You would be surprised how kind of easy it is to accidentally make Mael a god. I wish that the game around Act 2 started to get really, really hard and it forced you to use the best skills and find the best synergy in your team, where the game sort of just gets easy to the point where you don't really have to find synergy. You don't have to make a good build. You don't have to put that effort in because sometimes you'll overlevel and just be too good for the game anyway. My girlfriend is a cozy gamer. She doesn't really play games like this, but she saw how good it looked and she wanted to give it a try. And I put her on expert mode right away just to test this out. And even with minimal exploring, she still killed Goblu, the Flying Waters boss, in like 90 seconds. 90 seconds is not long enough to listen to Rain from the Ground. I want to listen to that track longer. Make Goblu harder, please. In my opinion, the game is so near perfect that sometimes I really have to pull myself back when I see one of these issues and remind myself that I'm playing a game. It is that immersive. Every single issue here can be fixed in a future update, and Sandfall has made it very clear that before working on anything else, they want to perfect this game first. So I'm pretty confident that in a couple months, half of these issues I just stated will be non-existent. It is their first priority to perfect this game, and I believe them. Halfway through recording all of this content, they put out a patch where they helped colorblind players, which includes me, see Lune's stains better by adding a symbol to all of them, and I absolutely love that. I could not tell them apart before. In this same patch, they added a retry feature after you lose a battle, so you can get right back into the battle right after a loss instead of having to run all the way back to that enemy and re-encounter them. This was something I was going to put in the nitpick section here, but in the middle of getting all of this footage for this game, they put this out. So they have already shown they are willing to go into this game and improve upon it instead of just making minor bug fixes. I am confident that this nitpicky section of the video will age poorly and none of this shit will even be in the game after a while.
Hello, it's me, back in post again. As I'm editing this video, I see that Sandfall announced a free update, including a new level to explore, more outfits, and more powerful late-game bosses to fight. I am so excited, and this just further proves how much they care about their game. Something that could have been easily pawned off as DLC is released for free because their first priority isn't to bend you over and take your wallet. As I said, these guys care, and the game will continue to be improved upon for the simple fact that Sandfall is awesome. Anyways, back to the yap sesh.
Let's talk about one more thing before we get into the score. I want to talk about something that is super important, especially when it comes to this game, and that is the impact that this game is going to have on the gaming industry as a whole. As stated before, the developers of this game broke off from Ubisoft. Ubisoft is one of many AAA giants in the United States creating games that are infamous for having traits that are causing the decline of
modern gaming,
such as overall corporate greed, releasing the bare minimum to max out profit margins, trend chasing instead of true innovation, safe but very generic development. There's also the classic battle passes and microtransactions, things that lead to a game feeling soulless. Companies that are full of dev teams whose first priority is to make something to fill their pockets instead of making something that's truly fun. When that doesn't work, they bank on our nostalgia and release uninspired remakes of games that were much better from the past. Sequels 20 years later from fantastic games that did not need a sequel, further putting on display their unoriginality. These idiots can bitch and moan all they want about the successes of Expedition 33 and Elden Ring and Hollow Knight and what other bangers come out for the years to come. If these AAA CEOs graduated middle school, they would realize that competition breeds innovation. But I'm very sure they know that. They've just become very complacent. They hate on the success of new IPs from great studios because they're gluttonous and they're afraid they might actually have to put some effort into their next project. I absolutely have zero sympathy for any of them. These leeches ruined the gaming industry, and this is why absolute gems like Expedition 33 feel so rare nowadays. It really is a diamond in the rough, because it's been rough out here. In the Lord's year 2025, where we're getting remakes, remasters, and sequels out the wazoo, it's about time we have true artists making true art, creating fantastic new movies, TV shows, games, rather than a bunch of suits. Sandfall truly missed the art in gaming. They broke off from the gaming industry to make something fresh, yet so nostalgic. Expedition 33 reminds me of the early PS1 and PS2 days from my childhood, where it was clear that so much love and passion went into games. It was a time where big game studios were reliable and we didn't have to rely on indie games to get a good experience. It's so refreshing to play something like this, where it was crafted with so much intention in mind, so detached from the sad state of what gaming has become. This game is a giant middle finger to the greedy games industry. Expedition 33 is what the gaming industry needs right now. This game should shake the gaming industry because it represents everything that modern gaming should be. They've brought such creative minds and talented developers together to bring us a world with great game mechanics, amazing music, and a well-crafted story. All these things work in a perfect combination. Nothing falters. It all flows together in the most perfect way. Add being immersive and absolutely wonderful to look at. The passion here is unmatched. And if there's any type of game that Western developers hate, it's a passion project. Sandfall contains the best of both worlds, with the best of the old and the best of the new, without all the bullshit that came with either one. Like of games of old, they add so many details in the game that don't need to be there. Modern games cut these things out because they are unnecessary. It makes me think of things in this game like in the prologue, the minigame where you help a man paint a canvas. After the little minigame, he paints a mural to Gustav and Sophie. And then later in the game, when you're inside the opera house, you can see this mural on the ceiling. And if you didn't do this minigame, this mural wouldn't be here in the opera house. There's many of these unnecessary additions that just add to the experience. What games past like 2010 are doing shit like this anymore? Expedition 33 brings the love and passion that went into old games and mixes it with the talent and technology that modern gaming brings to the table. A story that gives you setups and payoffs, foreshadowing, tight pacing, a morally complex story in and of itself, interesting characters, crafted with honesty and authenticity. Expedition 33 was made by 33 people, and a small team like this can keep focus without anything getting muddled. A AAA studio with thousands and thousands of employees are never going to be able to follow one vision. With so many members of HR and middlemen trying to cut corners and meet quotas, with that you're going to get thousands of clashing ideas and lose the plot. And I feel as though that this theme is present in Expedition 33. It's a statement on the AAA studios. How Verso's canvas is being torn apart by different painters, twisting a world around that he once loved. In today's economy, there are very few games I would spend $70 or $80 on. I'm a patient person. I typically wait a year or so for games that look interesting to go on sale. With that said, I would absolutely spend $70 on this game in a heartbeat. But that's the best part. It's a $50 game. It released at $50. In a world where $70 games are unfinished and full of bugs and lack focus, this game is a complete project, the whole package. $50. This $50 price tag includes everything you need. There's no extra price tags added on later, no microtransactions or battle passes of any kind. The fact that they released this absolute masterpiece of a AAA quality for less money than what most unfinished pieces of shit games are coming out in the West is proof that we are due for a crash in the gaming industry. Even Superman 64 came out 2.5 decades ago and cost more at launch than this game does. Games with enormous budgets should not be coming out half-baked. It's ridiculous and wasteful of resources. E33 coming out when it did is so important. It proves you do not need a huge budget with a huge team to make something with a huge impact. The highly anticipated Hollow Knight sequel, Hollow Knight Silksong, even released at $20, when you know they could have gotten away with releasing this for $60 and it still would have blown records away. $20 for Silksong, again, is crazy for the quality experience you're going to get. I hope big games like this releasing in 2025 will start to see a trend where game devs don't look at their audience like their statistics, where developers will start to battle against these AAA companies and their shit quality and terrible prices. This game was made by gamers for gamers. They made something immersive and fun to play because it's something they wanted to play. I see a future where there is more funding for indie developers and AA studios to continue to produce quality experiences. Expedition 33 is truly a genesis of something beautiful, a turning point, a chance to get gaming back to form, a chance to bring gaming back to gamers. And hey, maybe it's just me. Maybe I just really love this game because it reminds me so much of the PS1 and PS2 era. a modern take on a game from the golden age. I don't think some gamers are going to be able to relate to this because they started in the PS3 or PS4 era and they don't have a frame of reference. I recommend this game to absolutely everyone, especially to my fellow pioneers from the late 90s and early 2000s. If you are from that era, you would know we are on the incorrect timeline, and we should be getting games of this quality by the truckload. A timeline where corporate greed didn't infect their greasy fingers into our favorite hobby. A timeline where IGBG continued to make Gwimbly games. In my opinion, the pursuit of ever increasing profits tears away and erodes everything that is great. The only way that this can stop is to continue paying for games of a good quality. We need to stop paying for this bullshit and talk to these AAA companies with our wallets instead of our mouths. It's the only language that they can understand. This game winning Game of the Year will show these AAA companies what gamers actually want. No gimmicks, no microtransactions, just fun, just art. Expedition 33 reinvigorated my love for gaming and quickly became my favorite game of all time. It looks better, it plays better, it sounds better than most other games that exist. It's a fully original concept and story written by people outside of the US. Imagine that. This game is so unbelievably good, I don't know how Sandfall is going to follow this up. But I have faith, because they've proven they have so much passion, and they care about creating something for the consumer, not the shareholder. I personally would hate to be the next developer or writer that gets hired by Sandfall, and your first task is to top this game. Seriously, good luck, bro. At the end of the credits, you get this amazing thank you message, and I just want to say, no, thank you, Sandfall. Thank you for doing the little things correctly. Thank you for making a banging soundtrack. Thank you for all of your passion. And thank you so much for paving the way for future generations of games to come out with love and passion and those who come after. No game is perfect, and not everyone is going to see this game as a masterpiece like I do. But I can assure everyone that plays this game, if you give it a shot, will at least bare minimum come out of this experience not at all regretting it. Absolutely nothing is without issue. No piece of media or art piece is. But this is by far the closest I've ever come to playing a perfect video game. Not only is this easily my game of the year, but it's probably the game of all time. If you're going to play this game, don't look up any broken builds or spoilers. This game is best enjoyed going in blind and being completely immersed. I think E33 should easily win Game of the Year. A lot of people are saying that it's a pretty tight race this year, but I don't think it's anywhere close. And I believe it's because this is such an important release that should be celebrated by gamers. Because it's such a turning point. Because it's so much worth the hype. And this is coming from someone who's played over 1,000 games. I've become critical and even nitpicky at times when it comes to playing games. I've been doing this shit for a long time, so it means something for me to glaze this game as much as I do. Games like this just don't come out very often anymore, so you need to enjoy these games when you are able to. This game is wonderfully original and captivating, bringing all sorts of fresh gameplay mechanics and story beats that I've never seen done before. The world, the atmosphere, the music, you name it. Each detail going the extra mile to bring you an amazing gaming experience. Sandfall not only checked every box, but exceeded expectations at every level, truly raising the bar. And IGN gave this a 9, by the way. If this is a 9, I don't know what a 10 is supposed to be. Nice fumble, IGN. If you decide to play this game, seriously, pay attention to the dialogue. Talk to every NPC. Really soak in these characters. Get lost and immersed in the world. If this game has earned anything, it's your attention. The pacing of this game is perfect. It's not too long and it's not too short. Just the perfect length, which really encourages replayability. With how much I loved Elden Ring, it is extremely hard to pull 100+ hours out of my ass just for a rematch against Mesmer the Impaler. With the success of this game, I see it having a similar impact in the way that Elden Ring did, where Elden Ring's cultural impact spawned so many new Souls-likes. I predict a true resurgence in turn-based RPGs. It's one of those games that after you finish it, you ask yourself how you're even supposed to enjoy another game. The type of game you procrastinate playing because you don't want to finish it. One of those games you wish you could erase from your memory so you can experience it all over again. 2025 truly looks to be an amazing year for gaming. I just finished Donkey Kong Bonanza, and I'm super glad that 3D platforming is still so alive and well. Bonanza was truly a fantastic game and will easily be nominated. Split Fiction is still on my list. I absolutely loved A Way Out and It Takes Two. And I absolutely loved Hollow Knight, so you know Silksong's on my list as well. But Expedition 33 is something that sets the bar. It's truly special, and I just see it pulling more and more away from all of these other games, as great as they are. This isn't just a game to me, it's art. This will win Game of the Year 2025, and if it wasn't obvious already, this game is a 10. The biggest, fattest, girthiest 10 I could possibly give. Thank you for being here and watching my hair grow with me. This is my first time ever making a video, and I would absolutely love to do this more. I love games and I want to talk about them more. I even want to review some stinkers. I never knew how much work went into creating a video. This took me a long time to do. So please, do the YouTube things if you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe. If you didn't like the video or you think there's something I can improve on, please let me know down below. And I'm going to try and post this before the Game Awards, so I'm really hoping the title doesn't age poorly. There's so much more that can be improved in my videos and the editing process, and I will improve. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you for making it to the end. And I really hope you'll be around for whatever word salad I have cooked up for next time. P.S. This is me putting my money where my mouth is. If anything else wins Game of the Year, I'm out $100. And if that's the case, the shit's rigged anyway. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.